Don't come back if you can't even handle basic housework. My mother-in-law yelled at me angrily. She said this while I was in the hospital with a broken leg. The ironic thing was that she was the reason I got hurt, but instead of apologizing, she wanted to throw me out of the house. At that point, I had had enough. "Oh, I'd be happy to leave, ma'am," I replied with a smile. But a few days later, something happened that changed everything. "Do you have any idea, Mom?" my husband asked her. "Did you not know about Emily?" When my husband revealed the truth, my mother-in-law's face went pale. "My name is Emily Johnson. I married Alex 3 years ago after meeting him through a friend. Alex's family runs a small diner, mostly managed by his mother. His father passed away when he was young, so she raised Alex by herself, which I knew must have been a tough journey. At first, I respected her deeply. After we married, I kept working, as Alex wanted. He was running the diner alongside his mother, but my mother-in-law didn't like that I wasn't helping around the house. A woman who doesn't even do chores? And working? Women don't earn much anyway. She would complain every day. Soon, her complaining turned into harassment. "You don't do any chores," she'd say, and if I found time to help, she'd criticize my work. "You're not even doing it right. Do you even care?" No matter how hard I tried, nothing seemed good enough for her. She'd scold me, calling me useless and often lecturing me for hours. My stress kept growing. When I tried to talk to Alex about it, he just said, "It's between you two, don't drag me into this," and kept out of it. Then, one day, things took a turn. The diner was closed, and my mother-in-law left early in the morning. By evening, I received a sudden call, demanding that I come and get her. The call ended abruptly before I could even refuse, leaving me with no choice but to reluctantly head to the train station. When I finally reached the station, she did nothing but complain all the way home, accusing me of being late and complaining about the heating system. It was nothing new, so I just nodded and shrugged it off, but I guess that got on her nerves. "What kind of attitude is that? Don't you think it's disrespectful to your mother-in-law?" she snapped. In a fit of rage, she raised her hand against me, even though I was driving. "Ouch, stop it, I'm driving," I said. "Quiet," she yelled, "don't you dare talk back to me." My pleas fell on deaf ears as she was blinded by anger. Not satisfied with slapping me, she tried to kick me hard, but her foot hit the steering wheel. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed. "Where am I?" I asked the nurse, who was changing my drip. "You were brought to the hospital after a car accident," she explained. "You broke your right leg and have cuts and bruises all over your body." "How's my mother-in-law?" I asked, concerned. "She only has a few scratches, no one else was injured," the nurse reassured me. I felt slightly relieved. However, when my mother-in-law came to my room, she immediately started yelling at me. "It's all your fault I got injured. You need to pay me compensation," she screeched the moment she saw me injured. "Where did you get injured?" I asked. She rolled up her sleeve and showed me a small piece of gauze. Meanwhile, I was confined to my bed, unable to move. After all, the accident was her fault. She lost her temper and hit me while I was driving, causing the crash, but there wasn't a single word of apology from her. On top of being good for nothing, you want to be a nuisance to your own mother-in-law? You're nothing but a god of pestilence. I never liked you from the start. Don't you dare come back if you can't even do basic housework. The moment I heard those words, I could feel something snap inside me. "Oh, I'd be delighted to do that, ma'am," I said, before I even knew it. My mother-in-law just stood there with a stunned look on her face. "I won't be returning to your house. I'm going to divorce Alex. Thank you for everything until now," I said as I gave a slight bow. My mother-in-law snapped out of her shock and responded, "Oh, how unusual for you to listen for once. Yes, just as you say, I'm useless and worthless. I don't belong in your house," I said, pretending to be downcast. She left the hospital room saying, "Oh, I see," unable to say anything more. Even after that, my mother-in-law kept coming to my hospital room and complaining. "You'll end up on the streets if you can't come back to our house. It'll be too late to regret it then." "Yes, you're right. It would have been better if you had done this sooner," I replied casually, not looking up from my phone. "You're absolutely right," she kept complaining. "Are you listening?" I ignored her as usual, scrolling on my phone. This happened several times. A week after I was admitted to the hospital, my mother-in-law came to my room to complain again. As usual, I ignored her, but then, suddenly, my husband Alex burst in, pale-faced. "Oh, It's unusual for you to visit. What changed your mind? I asked. What on earth is this? Alex asked, holding up a divorce paper with my details already filled in. I asked my family to mail it. I'm glad it arrived just fine, Alex said, with a slight smile. I calmly told him everything my mother-in-law had said to me. Mom, did you not know? Emily earns way more than I do. Alex turned pale as he asked this in a shaky voice. Yes, I've been working for a large corporation since before we got married. I've worked hard and achieved good results, so I hold a fairly high position now. My salary reflects the toughness of the job and, as you put it, is quite substantial. But she doesn't look like she earns that much, does she? My mother-in-law retorted. She always wears the same clothes. That's because Emily has been spending her money on our diner, Alex explained. The diner my mother-in-law runs was on the brink of bankruptcy when Alex took it over. It was in a tough spot, and his mother had no business acumen. He'd been trying to turn it around, and I had been using my salary to help keep it afloat, offering advice on management. Without my help, the diner would probably go out of business soon. No, it can't be true. There's no way that useless woman could do such a thing, my mother-in-law exclaimed, still flustered and unable to believe what she was hearing. I showed her my phone, which I had been using until just a moment ago. What is this? She asked, staring at the screen. It's the data recording of your diner's performance, and this here is my pay stub. My workplace has digitized our payslips, I explained. My mother-in-law stared at my phone and slowly turned pale. No, that can't be, she stuttered. I should mention that I've already consulted with the police about the accident you caused. What? My mother-in-law's expression was utterly shocked. I could only sigh in exasperation. Since an accident occurred, of course the police will conduct an inquiry, right? So I reported everything exactly as it happened to them, and I've submitted the dash cam footage. Why? Why would you do that? She asked, visibly nervous. From her reaction, it seemed like she was aware that she caused the accident. There's a chance you could be held criminally liable, I said, but if you admit it, you might get off with a lighter sentence. After a while, my mother-in-law started trembling, and then to my surprise, she knelt before me. I'm sorry, I had no idea. We've been living off your money. I'm sorry about the accident too. I'm reflecting on my actions. Please forgive me. She changed her attitude right away. Until now, she'd never uttered an apology. Is it that easy to say sorry when it means she can get off the hook? The sight of her was pathetic. It made me more disgusted than angry. Emily, Mom's really sorry. You'll forgive her, right? Alex said, his voice pleading as he laid his hand on my mother-in-law's back. She looked up at him with tearful eyes, and he nodded reassuringly. Watching them try to garner sympathy, I couldn't help but speak up. What are you saying? I will never forgive you. Huh? Isn't it obvious? I said, actually, I intended to divorce you even before this mess with your mom. Alex was taken aback by my unexpected response. Even when I was seriously injured and hospitalized, you never visited me. You spent my salary without a shred of gratitude. I've been fed up with you for a while now. What's the point of staying married to you? In fact, you're only bringing me down. That's why I'm divorcing you. I smiled brightly, in stark contrast to Alex and my mother-in-law, whose faces were filled with despair. There was some fuss afterward, with Alex throwing a tantrum, but once I mentioned getting a lawyer involved, he quickly signed the divorce papers. He should have just signed them without making such a fuss. I couldn't be more disappointed in him, but the regret of marrying him cut deep. Once they lost my support, their family diner quickly faced operational issues and shut down in no time, leaving Alex and my mother-in-law in a poor state. My mother-in-law had said she would be left on the streets, but it seems they were the ones in that predicament. They sold off the diner for peanuts and moved to a rundown apartment. Having no work experience outside the diner, they could only find low-paying jobs, barely scraping by. By the way, it turned out that my mother-in-law had lied about losing her husband at a young age. She was actually quite the player, and her fed-up husband had filed for divorce and left her. Even on the day of the accident, she was out gallivanting with another man. I found out these details from a police officer who was investigating the accident. I have nothing but gratitude for the police who kept up the investigation. My mother-in-law will probably be charged with some crime at some point. Already living a miserable life, if they end up in police custody, they will likely face ruin. Perhaps sensing this, I received a plea for reconciliation from my ex-husband after our divorce. If you continue to bother me, I'll have the cops come for you and your mother, I threatened. After that, he never showed up in front of me again. The divorce went through smoothly, and I cut ties with my in-laws. My broken bone healed after treatment. Currently, I'm working hard while still recovering from my injury. I had been using my salary for my in-laws' diner before, so I had almost no money left for myself. But it's different now. I'm working for myself and able to spend money only on myself. I had no idea how much happiness this would bring. I'm thinking of valuing myself more, and if I can find a partner who values me, I'm considering getting remarried.
Hi, I'm Camilla, 30 years old, and I've been married to Patrick for 3 years. We don't have children yet. Our lives took a significant turn after the sudden passing of Patrick's father, Jesse. At the time, we were living in another state, and the news of Jesse's unexpected heart attack hit us hard. During the funeral, Patrick's uncle subtly suggested that as the youngest and only son, Patrick should return home to be closer to family and support his mother. A few months later, Patrick told me that he had arranged a job transfer to be closer to his family home. He made the decision on his own and only informed me afterward, which really upset me. A decision that big should have involved both of us. When I confronted him, Patrick apologized, explaining that he had expected me to resist the idea. He knew that I didn't get along well with his mother, Mary, a feeling that was mutual. When we lived farther away, our visits to his parents were mostly limited to extended holidays, partly due to our work schedules. Mary often complained about how infrequent our visits were, comparing us to Patrick's sisters Amanda and Diane, who lived nearby and visited frequently. Patrick always defended our situation, but the tension between Mary and me was never far from the surface. One of Mary's main issues with me was our lack of children. During a summer visit, she once openly questioned why we didn't have any yet, going so far as to compare me unfavorably to her daughters, who also didn't have kids. Her outdated views and intrusive comments about motherhood always grated on me. Still, when Mary's health began to decline, even Patrick grew more concerned, which played a big role in our recent decision to move closer to her. With Patrick now back home and me having quit my job, I dreaded the increased interaction with Mary. I even considered letting Patrick move back on his own, especially after hearing a friend's horror story about her husband's infidelity during a business trip. But after much thought, I decided to move with him. After all, we wouldn't be living with his mother full-time. Surprisingly, Mary seemed genuinely pleased with my decision. 3 weeks later, Mary invited me over for tea, something I had never accepted before. Reluctantly, I agreed. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Mary and Amanda were both there to greet me. Amanda wasted no time with her snark. "Pamela, it's been so long. Why haven't you visited since moving here?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Internally, I was already regretting coming. Mary, however, seemed oddly cheerful. "I was so happy when you decided to move closer," she said. "But it seems I was wrong. You don't like me, do you?" For a brief moment, I was tempted to confirm her suspicion just to see her reaction, but I held my tongue. "I don't dislike you, Mary," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I've just been feeling unwell, adjusting to the move. The new environment has been tiring," I explained, which was partly true. I'd been resting at home due to fatigue, and Patrick hadn't even mentioned this visit. Why was I here today, only to endure their harsh words? Mary quickly accused me of disliking her. But wasn't it the other way around? How were we supposed to get along under these conditions? Amanda cut in sharply. "How can you speak to your mother-in-law like that? Apologize to her. Say you're sorry." I braced myself for Mary's anger, but her response caught me off guard. "You're right," she said, her voice unexpectedly soft. "I have been mean. I'm sorry, Pamela. And I'm also sorry about the comments I made about children. I was being nosy." I was stunned. I had expected a lecture, perhaps some hidden sarcasm, but there was none. Even Amanda looked surprised. "All I ever wanted was to hold a grandchild," Mary confessed quietly. She went on to explain that Amanda's husband was infertile and Diane seemed to be having fertility issues as well. So, she had placed her hopes on Patrick and me. Even though I knew about Amanda and Diane's struggles, Patrick and I had our own conversations about children. We were considering it, but it wasn't a decision to be rushed. "Please just give us some time," I replied, bowing my head slightly. Despite everything, I still felt a sense of duty. "I'm sorry," I added, "but do visit us sometime." With that, the tension seemed to dissolve. Mary and Amanda resumed watching TV, sipping their tea as if nothing had happened. "I like this announcer," Mary remarked about a local TV personality. "She's so energetic and bright." Watching them together, I felt a pang of regret. Maybe if I had been more outgoing, things could have been different with Mary and her family. It was a fleeting, somewhat naive thought, but I was relieved to have expressed my feelings earlier. Maybe this could lead to a better relationship between us, I hoped. But that hope didn't last long. Later that evening, Patrick came home, visibly upset. "Mom told me you said you have no intention of getting along," he said, his voice laced with anger. "She was crying, Pamela. What did you say to her?" I was taken aback. Just a few hours ago, he had left with a smile, and now he was accusing me of something completely different. "Patrick, there's been a misunderstanding," I began, trying to stay calm. I told her it's difficult for me to be friends with her given how things have been between us. But I never said I didn't want to get along. He didn't seem convinced. His earlier smile now felt like a distant memory, replaced by doubt. I felt a wave of fear. He fully believed Mary's twisted version of the story. I tried to explain further, but he wasn't listening. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. "After all the effort of moving here, weren't you prepared to make it work? If you're here with us, you need to be a bit more patient." Patrick glanced at me, his expression mirroring Amanda's words. I suddenly felt very alone. I moved here because I wanted to be with Patrick, not to appease Mary and Amanda. I looked him in the eye and said, "It's clear that Mary and the others might never approve of me. Maybe you should consider someone she likes more." The word divorce slipped out before I could stop it, and for the first time, Patrick looked genuinely alarmed. "Wait, hold on. How did we jump to divorce?" he asked, bewildered by the sudden turn. "I just want you to get along better with my family." He couldn't seem to grasp that his family might never truly accept me, which left me feeling equally baffled. But Patrick seemed determined to resolve the misunderstanding. The next day, he came home late from work and told me about his conversation with his mother. She had admitted that there was a misunderstanding and even apologized. "What a fuss," Patrick said, as if it were all behind us. Then, as if on a completely different note, he mentioned that Mary's birthday was coming up. "How about we celebrate her birthday at a fancy restaurant?" The sudden shift from turmoil to talks of a birthday celebration left me confused. But it was clear that Patrick was making an effort to mend things, even if the path forward seemed rocky. Patrick suggested that if we framed the birthday dinner as my idea, it might help shift Mary's perception of me in a positive direction. I was skeptical, given Mary's complex personality, but I agreed to make the reservation. I invited Amanda and the rest of the family, booking a table for 8. Patrick was on board, but as the day approached, an uneasy feeling grew inside me. Patrick had been distant lately, his responses to my attempts at conversation curt and indifferent. I felt more isolated with each passing day. The night of the dinner arrived, and we walked into the restaurant to find Mary, Amanda, and their spouses already seated. The host showed Patrick and me to our table, casting a curious glance in our direction, adding to my discomfort. "Happy birthday, Mary," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I greeted Mary cheerfully, trying to bridge the gap. However, she didn't even acknowledge me, instead turning to the others and thanking them for joining her celebration. It felt like a deliberate snub. Amanda glanced at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I thought today was a family gathering," she remarked, her brief, puzzled look leaving me uneasy. Diane, sensing the tension, glanced over with concern, making it clear that I was being deliberately excluded. Determined not to let it ruin my evening, I decided to quietly keep to myself and leave early. But just as I settled on this plan, a staff member approached our table with a slightly awkward expression. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was actually made for 7 people tonight," he informed us. Confused, I responded, "I distinctly remember reserving for 8. Could there be a mistake?" "No, it was definitely changed to 7, the staff member replied, recalling my original reservation. But about a week ago, we received a call from a gentleman asking to reduce the number. Stunned, I turned to Patrick for an explanation. His response floored me. Yes, service for 7 is fine. Everyone's here now, he stated plainly, confirming that he had made the change himself. In that moment, I felt a wave of betrayal and disbelief. Patrick's actions made it clear that despite his claims of wanting to smooth things over, his commitment was superficial at best. The realization that he had manipulated the situation without telling me cast a dark shadow over what was supposed to be a festive family gathering. I stood there, stunned. Patrick turned to me with a glare, and I braced myself. I heard from Mom that you've been undermining our family, saying I don't earn enough, and that I'm insensitive. You had a lot to say, huh? It turned out that a week ago, when Patrick contacted Mary about the dinner reservation, she had filled his ears with all sorts of falsehoods. Blinded by anger and believing her without question, he had called the restaurant, pretending to be me, and reduced the reservation from 8 to 7. Since the staff recognized the family name, they didn't question the change. I couldn't believe how easily Patrick had been misled. The realization hit hard. His loyalty had wavered, and it seemed like I was the only one trying to salvage something real in this tangled web of family drama. I questioned my presence there as frustration boiled over. When I confronted Patrick, demanding that he apologize to everyone and reflect on his actions, he did something unexpected. He insisted that I should apologize to my in-laws and go home alone to think things over. Naturally, I refused. I couldn't apologize for things I hadn't said, nor did I need a husband who took his mother's word over mine. Tears of frustration welled up in my eyes. Why had I even followed him here? Seeing my distress, Patrick began to panic, but it was too late. Mary, observing the scene, wore a smug smile, clearly pleased with the chaos she had stirred. I spoke coldly to Patrick. Next time, marry a younger, more docile daughter-in-law. Maybe then you'll have the children and happiness you want. Mary's response came sharp and cutting. Pamela, why don't you go back to your parents' house? A daughter-in-law is ultimately an outsider. I can't see you as part of this family. You're not charming at all, so please leave, quickly. Her words stung, but they also solidified my resolve. I didn't need to be told twice. I'm leaving, with or without your approval. Good luck finding someone who can actually get along with someone as twisted as you, I retorted, turning on my heel to walk out of the restaurant. Patrick stayed silent, his head buried in his hands. As I neared the exit, I heard someone calling my name. It was Diane and her husband. Pamela, wait, Diane called out, her voice strained with distress. I can't stand it anymore. Mom and Amanda, they haven't changed at all. I knew the gossip about you was false. Her words, a rare acknowledgement of truth amidst all the chaos, gave me a flicker of solace. Diane continued, making it clear that she was ready to cut ties with the toxic environment. It was a small gesture of solidarity, but in that moment, it was something I desperately needed. As I stood there, processing her words, my phone buzzed. Mary's name flashed on the screen, and I sighed. What now? But before I could answer, Patrick's name appeared instead. Muttering under my breath, I glanced at Diane and her husband, who exchanged knowing looks. Pamela, you might want to go back to the restaurant, Diane said, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. You might see something interesting. They left, looking oddly pleased with themselves. I hesitated, but curiosity tugged at me, overpowering my desire to distance myself from the drama. Reluctantly, I turned back toward the restaurant, wondering what twist lay ahead. When I finally answered Patrick's frantic call, his voice was laced with panic. Pamela, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was all a lie. I'll send the divorce papers later, he blurted out, but then quickly added, almost pleading, wait, can't you come back? Please, it's a lifetime request. His almost childish plea might have made me laugh if not for Diane's cryptic hint lingering in my mind. Against my better judgment, I decided to return to the restaurant. When I arrived, I was met with an unexpected scene. A crowd had gathered around Patrick's table where a local TV announcer, Mary's favorite, was speaking into a microphone. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Mary was stumbling over her words, clearly flustered as she tried to explain herself. No, that's not it. It's a misunderstanding, she stammered. Patrick and Amanda sat awkwardly, looking completely unprepared for the spectacle unfolding before them. The announcer, relentless, pressed Mary further. You loudly declared that Pamela is an outsider and should leave. Could you explain what you meant by that in detail? Meanwhile, Diane's husband, along with others who had been offended earlier, had quietly slipped away from the scene. I stood there, dumbfounded, as I pieced together that this had somehow turned into a public spectacle, and judging by the cameras, it was possibly being broadcasted live. A staff member approached, noticing my confusion. "It's been quite a day, hasn't it?" they remarked, explaining that a TV recording had been scheduled at the restaurant that day, which explained the unexpected media presence. The entire family drama had accidentally played out on live television, exposing everything to the public in stark, unfiltered detail. I stood there, processing the whirlwind of events, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and vindication. This bizarre turn of events had unfolded in such a way that the truth was now out for everyone to see. The private dining area hadn't been as secluded as they thought, and conversations had been easily overheard. Just as I was about to step outside for air, a famous TV announcer approached Mary, beaming. "Mary, would you be willing to do an interview?" he asked cheerfully. Mary, always an avid fan of the media, lit up with excitement. "An interview? Absolutely," she exclaimed, eager to soak in the attention. The announcer smiled. "We're talking about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationships today. We heard there was a bit of a heated argument earlier, and the daughter-in-law left in tears. Can you tell us what happened?" Mary's face went pale at the unexpected question. Amanda's expression mirrored her mother's as they both struggled to come up with a response. Their manipulation and scheming had now been laid bare, and they were cornered into explaining the truth. Just then, from across the room, Patrick spotted me. He looked desperate, his eyes pleading. "Pamela, please," he called out. But by now, his words were nothing more than noise against the backdrop of the chaos that had unfolded. "I can't let this shame be known. It was all a misunderstanding," Patrick implored, looking utterly defeated. But by then, any feelings I had for him had evaporated. Mary, attempting to smooth things over, forced a strange smile. "Oh, we usually call each other Pamela," she said, trying to paint a picture of familiarity. "Pamela, come over here," she beckoned, her voice unnervingly sweet. As I approached, the announcer directed the microphone toward me. "You say you call each other Pamela, but how does the daughter-in-law truly view her mother-in-law?" they asked. Calmly, I responded, "I've never been called that." I paused. "I have, however, been called unpatriotic for not having children. Multiple times. Patrick and I haven't felt ready or confident enough to start a family. We haven't even tried in over 2 years, and I've been repeatedly told that's grounds for divorce." I continued, sharing how Patrick had initially supported me when I first fell ill and had to take a leave from work. I appreciated his kindness and followed him here, thinking a change of environment might help. "But this," I said, gesturing to the scene around me, "is the result." By then, my tears had dried up, leaving only detachment. Seeing Mary and Amanda squirm with embarrassment brought a small flicker of satisfaction. As I stood there, fully aware this could all be broadcast nationwide, I couldn't help but reflect on the surreal nature of the day. Watching Mary's distressed expression when I mentioned the broadcast made me smile. "Well, since I'm considered an outsider, I suppose I should leave. Goodbye," I said, savoring the moment as I turned to exit the restaurant. I ignored the shouts and commotion that followed, feeling a wave of relief as I walked away. The day had been long and fraught with emotion, but in that final moment, I felt a profound release. Walking away from that chaotic scene, a mix of relief and satisfaction settled in. Although Mary and her family managed to prevent the footage from airing, the incident caused a local stir, becoming a hot topic among relatives and acquaintances. The gossip spread quickly, fueling endless speculation. I returned home, packed my belongings, and moved back to my parents' house. I sent Patrick the divorce papers, but his response was delayed, prompting me to consider involving a lawyer. To my surprise, Patrick soon appeared at my parents' doorstep. My father, Peter, usually a composed and calm man, took charge of the situation with a firm hand. Patrick, clearly remorseful, offered a heartfelt apology. He claimed he would sever ties with his family and promised to trust only me going forward. But his words felt hollow, too little, too late. Visibly upset by the years of distress Patrick had caused, my father didn't mince words. "Why didn't you realize this sooner? What have you put Pamela through all these years? Just sign the divorce papers and leave," he instructed sternly. With regret etched across his face, Patrick handed over the papers. His handwriting was shaky, barely legible. Despite the difficulty, the divorce was processed smoothly. It later emerged that Amanda had been the true cause of her infertility, a fact she had wrongly blamed on her husband. Now on the brink of her own divorce, she no longer visited her in-laws. Patrick returned to live with his mother, Mary, in their small hometown, likely facing the weight of uncomfortable rumors. But that chapter of my life was closed. In the months that followed, life took a more positive turn. I reconnected with a classmate from my hometown, and we eventually married. Our relationship is filled with joy, and we soon welcomed a child. We now have a 2-year-old daughter, and I am expecting our second child. My new mother-in-law is a blessing, supportive, kind, and everything Mary was not. Life is unpredictable, but in this moment, I am living a fulfilling and happy life surrounded by the love and support I once thought was out of reach.
You've inherited over $3 million, right? We've already started constructing a duplex for us to live together. I've even included the kitchen of my dreams, my mother-in-law says in a tone that's almost dreamy. I've quit my job. I'm planning to start a business with the inheritance that Ashley has received. My husband announces, looking oddly pleased. Wait a minute, I've told you I haven't received any inheritance yet, right? You've quit your job, and you're building a duplex. What's happening? Don't lie. It's clear you've inherited. How about we take a trip before the house gets built? How about Hawaii? My father-in-law chimes in, adding to the growing confusion with my husband and my mother-in-law. What on earth are these people thinking? They want to use the precious inheritance I received from my mother and spend it on whatever they please. Even though I was filled with rage, I didn't know what to do. The story goes back a few months ago. My name is Ashley. I'm 38 years old and work as a high school teacher. I married David, an office worker who is 2 years older than me, 12 years ago. Soon after we got married, our only daughter Julie was born, and since then, my days have been filled with work and child rearing. Today is the day I'm visiting my hospitalized mother with my daughter. Oh, Grandma, it's been a while. Well, Julie, welcome. My mother lies in her bed, lovingly stroking Julie's hair. Her hand is noticeably thinner, and her complexion looks poor. Next to my mother's bed stands a middle-aged man wearing glasses and a suit. As I nod towards him, he returns the nod and leaves the room. Mom, who is that man? Just an acquaintance. Don't worry about it. More importantly, Ashley, are you still doing well? And David, is he well? My mother's eyes, a shade close to blue, sparkle softly as she smiles. She met my father, who ran an import-export business overseas, and came to the U.S. as his bride. Raising a child in a foreign country must have been hard, but my mother and father worked together to bring me up. One of the reasons I am able to work as a teacher today is because my mother taught me many things since I was small. I am deeply grateful to my parents who raised me with love in a wealthy family. After my father passed away a few years ago, my mother, now alone, fell ill and was hospitalized. She transferred the business to a relative, and now she spends her remaining days quietly in the hospital. I'm fine, Mom. Is there anything you need? Just having you and Julie come to see me is more than enough. After having such a conversation and spending a good amount of time talking with my mother, Julie, and I headed home. Julie talks to my mother about things that happened at school and the book she has recently read. She's at that tricky age of 10, but our relationship is good. Even if I take away my parental bias, I think she is a bright and honest child who is growing up well. We're home. Oh, welcome back. How's my mother-in-law doing? David asks as he greets us. Mom is as usual. How about you? Your seminar, was it? Oh, I heard some good stuff. Looking forward to the next one. Recently, my husband has been attending seminars on quitting his job and starting a side business. He must want more money, but the company he works for is not top tier. It's not bad, and with my salary, we are doing just fine. I find it distasteful when he is so greedy for money, which I suppose he gets from his parents. Ever since we got married, I've been put off by his parents' excessive stinginess and their habit of begging for small amounts of money whenever we see them, so I've been keeping my distance. They've never given Julie any Christmas gifts. Fortunately, my in-laws live far away, so we don't have to interact much, and my husband does well with household chores, so I guess it's okay. As long as I have my mother, my husband, Julie, and our modest but ordinary life, I'm content. Then one day, I got a call from the hospital. My mother's condition had suddenly worsened, and she was in critical condition. When my family rushed to the hospital, my mother was barely breathing. Mom? Grandma? No. Ashley, I always wanted you to be happy. Cherish Julie more than anything. I love you. In the end, those were my mother's last words. My mother, who raised me with all her heart alongside my father, adored Julie from the bottom of her heart. My mother's face in the coffin was peaceful, and all I could do was cry. Julie was by my side, crying with me. A little while after my mother passed away, an envelope arrived at our house, a law firm. Ashley was perplexed as she opened the envelope from an unfamiliar sender. Inside was a document stating, "I have been entrusted with your mother's will, which leaves all of her inheritance to you." Ashley and her mother had never discussed the subject of inheritance before, so she was taken aback. However, since the letter had indeed arrived, she decided to visit the law firm on her own. "Hello, I'm the attorney Ed." The man who appeared was the middle-aged gentleman with glasses who had been present when she visited her mother in the hospital. "You were in my mother's hospital room before?" Ashley questioned the man with the familiar face. "Yes, we met in the hospital room. Actually, from that time, I was entrusted by your mother." Hearing his kind voice, Ashley found herself on the verge of tears, and then she was shocked beyond belief. 500 million. Yes, Ashley. When your father passed away, you waived your right to the inheritance so your mother could receive it all. When you add that inheritance to your mother's personal assets, even after deducting taxes, this is the amount your mother has named you as the sole heir. My parents had indeed been wealthy, but I hadn't imagined that they had left such an inheritance. I had never asked my parents for money after getting married and avoided the topic of inheritance as it seemed unlucky. Feeling dizzy, I realized this must be an expression of love from my mother. With that thought, I left the procedures to Ed. "Your mother cared about you more than anything. She instructed me to assist you if necessary. Please feel free to discuss anything with me." "Thank you. I appreciate your help." Ashley bowed her head several times to Ed and left the room. Time passed, and it was around the time of her mother's 49th day memorial service. Her husband, David, began to frequently ask about her mother's inheritance. When they had married, her father was still running his business, so David was vaguely aware that they were wealthy. Each time she asked him to stop talking about it while she was still mourning, he would fall silent, only to subtly bring up the matter of money after some time. The worst were my in-laws. When they came to my mother's memorial service, my father-in-law said, "Ashley, if you are worried about the inheritance, we can help." Huh? Hey, we've had our fair share of disputes over inheritance. When unmarried siblings died, inheritance can be complicated. If you're troubled, feel free to talk about it. That's right. Rely on us too. Yes. Having never shown any inclination to assist them before, she could only give her in-laws a vague response as they put on a knowing facade. And then, about 3 months after her mother's death, David, who had been quiet recently, finally lost his patience. "Hey, have you received your mother's inheritance yet?" A bad feeling swept over her quickly. Ashley lied. The procedures are complicated, so not yet. In reality, she had already completed the procedures and, upon Ed's advice, had deposited the passbook containing the inheritance in a safe deposit box. But it felt right to say that now. "Really? But it's been 3 months since your mother passed away, right? Haven't you done the procedures yet?" "Yeah, so what?" "Well, never mind. I'm going to bed. For some reason, David headed for the bedroom in high spirits. With the nagging unease in her chest, Ashley prepared for work the next day and then headed for bed. The next day, as Ashley and Julie were cleaning up after dinner, the doorbell rang. Julie hurried to the door, and when Ashley poked her head out from the kitchen, she saw her in-laws who had dropped by unexpectedly and David returning from work. Why are my father-in-law and mother-in-law here? It's not a big deal, Julie. Go to your room. Julie glanced anxiously at us and headed to her room. What's going on? Never mind that, Ashley. We have something to celebrate today. Ed, her father-in-law, was in high spirits as he opened their fridge and took out a beer. Celebration. You inherited more than $300 million, didn't you? We've already started building a duplex house for us to live together. It even comes with a dreamlike modern kitchen. The one who spoke in the dreamy tone was her mother-in-law. What? What are you talking about, Ashley? Be happy. We've decided to build a duplex house. We used half of our savings and the money that Mom and Dad have put aside for the down payment. The loan is under my name, but you can pay it all at once with your inheritance, right? Give back to the two of them. I quit my job. I decided to start a business using that inheritance you received. David, her husband, looked somehow satisfied as he said these words. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? I told you I haven't received the inheritance yet, didn't I? And what does quitting your job and a duplex house mean? Don't lie, it's clear you've inherited. How about we go on a trip before the house is built? How about Hawaii? Amidst the escalating chaos, David and her mother-in-law were getting excited, agreeing with what Ed said. Then David said, laughing scornfully, "You're stingy, Ashley. We've looked into it because you kept saying you hadn't received the inheritance. You can't renounce an inheritance if you don't process it within 3 months. Whether you lied or told the truth about not processing, you still have inherited, right? That is, considering the scale of my father-in-law's company, there must be more than 300 million. We'll be able to live comfortably thanks to them. Thank you, mother-in-law. Be sure to prepare the money for the duplex house as soon as possible, and my capital too." Seeing David speak like that made her dizzy. But what on earth are these people who want to use my precious inheritance that I received from my mother as they please and indulge in luxury? Although filled with intense anger and about to yell, she couldn't say a word, worried about Julie, who was in the other room. "I'm going outside for a bit." She called out to the three of them, but they didn't hear her, happily discussing how they would use the inheritance. She went out without even taking her wallet. The night wind was cool, and it was then that the tears came. She went to the hilltop park where she used to come with her mother and cried, holding back her voice. Her anger didn't subside. Feeling frustrated and worn out, her heart was exploited. Her emotions were a mess, but she couldn't just say she wanted a divorce. They still had their child, Julie. Her mother's words, "Take care of Julie above all else," came back to her, and tears spilled again. Suddenly, someone spoke to her. Surprised, she opened her eyes, and the person began to speak softly. 3 days later, she called her husband and in-laws to a restaurant with private rooms. "So you finally came back home after that day. Did you withdraw the money, Ashley? You shouldn't leave home without telling your husband." "Exactly." Ignoring the words of the three people, she took out a document. It was a divorce notice already filled out. "David, I want a divorce." "What? What are you saying?" Her husband looked panicked, and her in-laws looked at each other. "I can't go on with you anymore." "What are you saying?" David's face was turning red as he lashed out at her. "You're leaving us after receiving the inheritance. You changed because you got the money, you miser." "That's my words, Ashley. Snap back. Ever since I inherited my mother's estate, you've been out of control. Quitting jobs to start a business, deciding to live with in-laws without even asking, taking out my savings to build a 2-family home, and then planning a trip to Hawaii. Who is the one who changed when the money came in? I can't possibly stay with such people." "Wait, you can't just divorce me like that." "That's right. Our savings after marriage are shared property. Half of the inheritance belongs to David, no matter what. That's correct. If it comes to that, we will take 300 million with us. David and my in-laws were foaming at the mouth as they approached me. Just as I was about to respond, the door to the private room slid open. Dad, Grandpa, and Grandma should know better. The inheritance Mom received doesn't become shared property, right, Mr. Ed? There stood my daughter Julie and Attorney Ed. Julie, and who are you? I'm Attorney Ed. Ashley's mother had entrusted me with this matter, and I've been advising Ashley. As Ed bowed, Dave seemed flustered. That's all well and good, but wait. The inheritance doesn't become shared property? That's correct. Inherited property from a deceased parent has not become shared property, nor is it subject to the division of property. What? You've got to be kidding me. Is this a mistake? That can't be. In front of the flustered three, I was taken aback. It seems that they really thought that the inheritance I received would become their property. In that case, it's even more reason not to divorce. I'll cling to you no matter what. My husband with bloodshot eyes shouted out without any regard. Stop it already? That was Julie. She continued her calm words. Since Mom suggested divorce, no, since Mom inherited the estate. Has Dad ever thought about Mom once? Grandpa and Grandma only ever talk about money. They never once mentioned me. I can't consider such people as family. David and my in-laws were taken aback. The day I was crying about my inheritance, Julie was the one who spoke up. Julie came running after me, and she told me Dad, Grandpa, and Grandma are too much, trying to take Grandma's legacy for themselves. Mom, I'm on your side. Let's fight this together. With those words, I made up my mind, contacted Ed, and arranged this meeting. Julie, it's not like that. Dad wants you to be happy. That's right, Julie dear. You'd be happier living with us, wouldn't you? That's right. A child shouldn't interfere. My desperate husband and still assertive in-laws. Julie, with an exasperated look on her face, said, I'm going with Mom. I can't bear to be with you anymore. Julie said this and looked away. Anyway, we've made up our minds. Julie and I will be leaving. As I said this calmly, David got angry. Hey, I've never cheated, and you can't force a divorce. I'll hire a lawyer. We'll get that money one way or another. If that's the case, I will take care of it from here. Ed spoke quietly. The issue here is whether there are grave reasons for not continuing the marriage, quitting his job, using the household savings without permission, deciding to live together, and Julie is saying she can't bear it. There are various points we can argue. Moreover, your daughter recorded the sound of all of you begging for Ashley's inheritance. That should also serve as evidence. Damn it. David slumped, and my in-laws turned pale. After seeing that, Julie and I left the restaurant. A year later, thanks to Ed's efforts, my divorce with David was finalized. Julie and I moved into the house my mother had lived in, but there were several times when we received letters saying, I love you, come back, and David was seen loitering near Julie's school. So we asked Abe to apply for a restraining order. After that, it was quiet. According to the rumors, they actually did build a two-family home. My already retired in-laws had to work in a factory, and although David looked for work, he couldn't find any and is now doing manual labor. I heard from the neighbors that there were constant arguments in the new two-family house because of their troublesome fights. They became disliked by everyone in the neighborhood. Julie and I are still living peacefully, helping each other. A while ago, Julie said, I want to study abroad in the country where Grandma grew up, so it cut ties completely with my ex-husband. We made up our minds to move overseas. We used a bit of my mother's inheritance, but I'm sure she would be pleased. Now, Julie seems to be enjoying school every day, and I've started working as a teacher there. I hope these peaceful days continue.
Hello, I'm Donna, a 38-year-old woman who has recently freed herself from a stifling marriage. The decision to part ways with my husband felt like reclaiming my true freedom. Allow me to share the story of my ex-husband, Michael. Michael and I first met through a blind date set up by a mutual friend. From the beginning, he was undeniably handsome and possessed an irresistible charm. He seemed to be everything I had ever wanted in a partner. We shared numerous interests and our conversations flowed effortlessly. For the first 7 months, we enjoyed a casual dating phase, taking turns planning exciting and enjoyable activities. Once we officially became a couple, our dynamic outings continued, and a year later, we moved in together. It was during this time that I became aware of Michael's unstable financial situation. Despite offering advice to help him advance professionally, he rarely took it seriously. Nevertheless, he earned enough to meet his needs, and I was prepared to support us both financially. 3 years into our relationship, we married and a year later, decided to buy a house. I secured the mortgage in my name alone due to my superior credit score, a decision that now seems fortuitous. However, 4 years into our marriage, I noticed a troubling shift in Michael's behavior. He became increasingly demanding and stopped contributing to household chores, claiming to be too busy with work. Despite my understanding and efforts to manage everything on my own, the burden became overwhelming. I addressed the issue with Michael, who would briefly promise to improve, but we soon fell back into old patterns. I tolerated this out of love and a desire to support him fully, but it took a toll on our relationship, especially in terms of leisure and enjoyment. It was under these strange circumstances that I discovered Michael's infidelity. I stumbled upon his affair quite unexpectedly. He had left his phone unlocked while taking a shower. I had no intention of snooping. I just wanted to charge his phone when a notification caught my eye. It was a message from a woman named Isabella, asking Michael how long it would be until he left his pathetic wife to meet her at a nearby motel. The shock and heartbreak were immediate. I couldn't believe Michael was capable of such betrayal. Our marriage had seemed solid, with Michael always greeting me warmly and us rarely arguing. The pain was overwhelming, a mix of tears and nausea as my world seemed to crumble. In that moment, I knew I had to confront the situation head-on. I left Michael's phone exactly as I found it, with the message still open, ensuring he would know I had seen it. When Michael emerged from the shower and saw his phone, he instantly realized I was aware of the affair. He tried to evade the conversation, but I was determined to address it. "I know about the affair," I said. "Let's talk about it." "I don't think we should," he replied. "Who is she? I'm sure you saw enough to know her name. When did it start?" "A year ago," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Can we not do this right now?" "Why did you start seeing her?" I pressed. "Please, let's not do this," he pleaded. "Don't call me babe." "Tell me," I insisted. "I don't know," he said. "I guess I just missed the thrill of someone new, someone on the same wavelength as me." "So not on the same wavelength as you?" I asked. "Well, I wouldn't say that exactly," he said. "It's just that you've become a bit dull. You never want to go out, you're always tired, and our social life, and even our life in the bedroom, has faded." "You realize I'm always tired because I handle all the chores and work full-time," I retorted. "You've never once offered to help." "That's just your role as my wife," he said. "I told you to stay at home, but you refused." "That still doesn't excuse you from contributing to the house," I said. This confrontation marked a turning point, making it clear that our views on marriage and responsibilities were vastly different. His words and actions shattered the trust and respect I thought we had. "I can do whatever I want," Michael declared, his words slicing through the tension in the room. "If that means having an affair for some fun, then so be it." His distorted view of freedom within our marriage was startling and painful. I had hoped we could discuss this and possibly repair our relationship, but his stance made it clear that was no longer an option. "I don't think anything will change," he continued dismissively. "You're just too dull. I'm happy to stay married, but I'll keep seeing Isabella. I need some space from you." His tone was cold and unapologetic as he retreated to another room, leaving me to grapple with the weight of his words. Michael's disregard and detachment were devastating. He had reduced me to a mere role within our home, despite never having previously held such outdated views on gender roles. It was apparent that he had been influenced by podcasts promoting the idea that women were too outspoken and needed to be controlled. Witnessing his transformation into someone who not only embraced these harmful ideas but also failed to acknowledge their damage was heart-wrenching. Soon after, I heard the front door slam. Michael had left to meet Isabella. Overcome by a profound sense of abandonment and betrayal, I could no longer bear the solitude or the storm of emotions crashing over me. In my distress, I called my best friend Judy. She answered right away, sensing the urgency in my voice. Within moments, she was at my door with comforting hugs and tubs of ice cream. She didn't press for details. Instead, she held me as I cried. When I finally composed myself enough to speak, I shared the painful revelation with her. Michael is cheating on me, Judy. It's true. Are you sure? She asked, concern etched on her face. Absolutely, I replied. His phone was unlocked, and I saw a message from a woman asking when he was leaving his pathetic wife to meet her. What did you do? Judy inquired. I confronted him, I said, tears welling up again. He barely wanted to talk about it. Judy stayed with me through the night, offering silent, steadfast support as I faced the harsh reality of my crumbling marriage. As we sat together, the gravity of my situation began to sink in, and though the future remained uncertain, I was grateful for her unwavering presence. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I finally confronted Michael and uncovered the painful truth. He had been cheating on me for a year. His excuse was that I had become too boring, always too tired and never up for anything fun. Despite managing almost everything at home, he dismissed my efforts, insisting it was simply my role as his wife. Well, if that's the role of a wife, then his role as a husband should have been more honorable, I told Judy, still reeling from the shock. Instead, here he is, cheating on me. Judy shook her head in disbelief. That's just a pathetic excuse. Did he even apologize? Not for a second, I replied. He just blamed me and chose to spend the night with her. Honestly, Judy, if I had to face him now, I don't know what I'd do. So, what are you thinking of doing next? Judy asked. I'm not sure. Michael mentioned he's fine staying married, but there's no way I can continue like this. Listen, Judy said, why don't you stay with me until you figure things out? I'll help you through everything. That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Judy. I really appreciate your support. We spent the rest of the evening trying to unwind, watching our favorite movies. It was a welcome distraction, but the reality of my situation lingered in the back of my mind. The next morning, Judy helped me pack some things to bring to her place. Once settled in at her home, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to look up Isabella. I still had access to Michael's social media on my phone, a privilege I had never abused before because I trusted him completely. I discovered that Michael had muted notifications for messages from Isabella, which explained why the affair had remained hidden until now. It turned out that Isabella was a coworker of his, actually someone who reported directly to him. She was 38 years younger than me and 11 years younger than Michael. Just that revelation alone was enough to make my stomach churn. This discovery solidified my decision. I needed to divorce Michael. I couldn't endure the betrayal, nor could I live with someone who saw me as merely an obligation. With Judy's unwavering support, I began taking steps to reclaim my life and dignity. Before filing for divorce, I needed to sort out a few things. Judy and I spent time strategizing not only about the logistics of the separation, but also about ensuring that Michael would face appropriate consequences for his betrayal. My first priority was to protect my finances. I transferred all the money I had contributed to our joint account into a personal account, ensuring that Michael had no access. In the days that followed, as I prepared to file for divorce, I heard nothing from Michael. It was a painful reminder of how little he valued our relationship. When I eventually returned home to collect more of my belongings, I found Michael lounging on the couch. His reaction to seeing me was as predictable as it was irritating. "Where have you been? Why haven't you told me where you were?" he demanded, his voice tinged with a faint concern that barely masked his real detachment. "Why should I explain myself to you? You haven't called once. Don't pretend to care now," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I'm sorry, but discovering your infidelity because you found me too boring doesn't exactly inspire politeness," I added with a touch of sarcasm. Michael seemed taken aback, but he quickly redirected the conversation to finances. "I noticed you withdrew a large sum from our joint account," he said, trying to sound casual but clearly concerned. "Yes, I took back my money," I replied. "Why should I let you squander what I've worked hard to earn?" He frowned and said, "What do you think you're doing? You need to put that money back." "Or what?" I challenged. "Are you going to kick me out, move in with Isabella, and have your sister take my place here?" I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of his threats. "Put the money back in 3 hours, or I'll make sure everything changes by tomorrow," he said, his tone growing menacing. I responded with silence, walking past him to our room. I quickly packed up the rest of my clothes and essentials, leaving him to stew in his frustration. Back at Judy's place, I recounted the entire encounter. Judy was furious on my behalf and insisted we consult the lawyer immediately. Fortunately, she knew someone who could help. We met with her lawyer friend, who first asked about the house. I explained that both the mortgage and the house title were in my name alone, a result of my well-paying job in a niche field. This detail was crucial as it meant I had significant leverage in the upcoming legal proceedings. With Judy's support and the lawyer's guidance, I felt better prepared to face the challenges ahead. Since I earned significantly more than Michael, it made sense for me to handle the mortgage and purchase the house, establishing it entirely in my name. This financial arrangement was straightforward and practical given our respective incomes. I had also taken care of everything the house needed. When I consulted with my lawyer about the impending divorce, he reassured me that the house would legally remain in my name, which lifted a weight off my shoulders. He also explained that if Michael's sister, Karen, moved in without my consent. Despite the tension, Michael informed me the next morning that Karen had moved in, citing my failure to reverse the money transfer. I kept the conversation brief, which only fueled his anger. He ended the call abruptly. Following my lawyer's advice, I began recording all conversations with Michael to maintain a reliable record for potential court use. My strategy moving forward was straightforward. I would issue Karen an eviction notice. If she complied, that would end the matter. If not, I was prepared to pursue legal action. Given our strained history, I anticipated it wouldn't be simple. Karen had always shown a peculiar hostility towards me, frequently trying to overshadow me in petty ways. She even attempted to disrupt our wedding and competed with me over trivial matters. Our relationship had deteriorated to the point where I had to limit contact with her. Michael, overly protective and indulgent toward his sister, often placed me in uncomfortable positions. Karen's resentment grew when she realized she couldn't outshine me, leading her to steal from our home during her visits. I would notice missing items, designer clothes, shoes, and skincare products. Michael urged me to overlook these incidents, rationalizing that Karen's frugal lifestyle justified her taking some luxuries. I strongly disagreed and eventually banned her from visiting our home altogether. Although neither Michael nor Karen was pleased with this decision, Michael was powerless to challenge it due to the legal standings and my control over the property. Determined to protect my interests and ensure a fair resolution to our marital breakdown, I was ready to stand my ground. Having had enough of Karen's antics and theft, I explained the extent of her actions to Michael. He understood that the damage was significant, but Karen continued to provoke me. One day, she called to gloat, "Hello, Donna. Guess where I am right now?" I remained calm. "Michael told me you've moved in." "That's right," she boasted. "I have this huge, glorious house all to myself, something you don't." "I still do have the house," I replied. "I've already sent an eviction notice your way, and you have 4 days to move out." She laughed derisively. "An eviction notice from you? Like I'm going to follow through with that. This is my brother's house, and he told me I can stay here, so I will." "It's not his house, Karen," I said firmly. "Regardless of what Michael told you, the legal documents show that the property is mine." Yeah, marital property or whatever, but he has all the power here," she insisted, misunderstanding the situation. "He decided this was the best thing to do." "You really can't stop talking, can you?" she snapped, trying to hurt me further. "I see why my brother chose someone else." "Fine," I said. "I have nothing more to say. Goodbye." I ended the call, but not before hearing Karen's spiteful laughter. If she didn't vacate within the 4-day deadline, I was fully prepared to take her to court. I had all the legal backing I needed. Unsurprisingly, Karen informed Michael of our conversation, and within an hour, he called me enraged. He questioned my audacity to issue an eviction notice. I chose not to respond to his anger. In the next 4 days, 2 significant events unfolded. First, I had the divorce papers served to Michael, and he shockingly decided to contest them. Second, Karen had still not moved out. True to my word, I had a court summons delivered to her. Legally, she was now considered a squatter. When Karen received the summons, she was visibly shocked to learn that the house was in my name, not her precious brother's. She confronted me, accusing me of trickery. I responded firmly, "I gave you ample warning and time to leave. I even sent you a formal eviction notice." The reality of her situation was finally dawning on her. I was ready to uphold my rights, no matter what. Karen's refusal to heed my warnings led her to face the consequences in court. My lawyer presented a solid case, including the eviction notice and recordings of phone calls where I repeatedly asked Karen to vacate the premises, which she blatantly refused. In my state, squatting was a serious offense, resulting in Karen being charged with a Class A misdemeanor. The look of utter defeat and humiliation on her face was deeply satisfying after enduring years of her antagonism. After the court proceedings, Michael and Karen, still unable to accept the defeat, confronted me at Judy's place, where I had been staying. "How could you do that to my little sister?" Michael demanded. "Your little sister has made my life miserable for years, and I finally put a stop to it in the only way I knew how," I replied, my frustration evident. "A decision you initially agreed with. Yet the moment I stood up for myself, you sided with her." Michael argued. "So the house suddenly became an option because we're separating. If we weren't, would you have snuck her in?" I cut him off. "Save it, Michael. I don't want to hear any more. I'll see you in court." "How is the house even in your name?" "My brother's name isn't on any of the documents. I've been paying off the mortgage and handling repairs for the past 4 years," I explained. "No matter how much your brother contests it, he won't gain any ownership of the house. All he'll get is a much lighter wallet." Karen interjected, clearly not understanding the legal situation. "You think I set him up?" "I did nothing of the sort. Your brother believed in being the man of the house but avoided real responsibilities, preferring that I handle everything while he enjoyed the benefits. Thank God that won't be my problem anymore," I retorted, my patience wearing thin. I slammed the door in their faces, ending the conversation. In the weeks that followed, Michael, realizing he couldn't win the house, decided to contest every single possession we shared, down to the most trivial items like our dessert spoons. The battle was petty and exhausting, but I was determined to fight for my peace and freedom. For every item Michael claimed as his, I had the receipts clearly showing who had paid for them. In truth, he hadn't contributed much, so his share was minimal. While Michael was preoccupied with this petty squabble, I took action on another front. I sent screenshots of his inappropriate communications with Judy to his company's HR department. Within 2 weeks, Michael was terminated from his job. Surprisingly, Isabella was not. I learned from some of Michael's colleagues, with whom I had remained friendly, that she had argued Michael coerced her into the relationship by threatening her professional standing. Understandably, their relationship did not survive this revelation. It took some time, but eventually, the divorce was finalized, and I was officially free to celebrate my newfound freedom and the successful resolution of a complex situation. Judy and I enjoyed a long celebration. It felt like a double victory. The last update I received on Michael and Karen was less than glamorous. They ended up living together in a modest apartment, both struggling to find jobs. Their parents were supporting them with a modest allowance, but they were far from pleased with their actions. My former in-laws even reached out to apologize for their children's behavior, a gesture that helped bring some closure to the entire ordeal. Now free, I looked forward to what life had to offer next. The entire experience reinforced a valuable lesson: never forget my worth. It also showed me that I could handle myself in tough situations. A force to be reckoned with. Here's to moving forward stronger and wiser. Cheers.
I go by the name Alice, leading a seemingly ordinary life as a housewife. My husband John is an exceptionally kind partner, and our relationship has been free of any disagreements. It's not to boast, but he truly is the ideal companion. Currently residing in an apartment close to John's parents' house, this decision was intentional. With both my parents no longer with us, we wanted to be nearby in case of the birth of our child or any unforeseen issues. Additionally, considering the potential future care needs of John's parents, I saw the practicality of our living arrangement. However, a strange occurrence started to unfold during our dinner gatherings with John's parents. Mysterious stomach pains plagued me, leading me to initially avoid meals at John's house. Unfortunately, circumstances forced me to attend, and that's when an unexpected event transpired, revealing a shocking revelation about my mother-in-law's actions, shedding light on the source of my inexplicable pain. Before these unsettling events, John and I had opted out of a traditional wedding ceremony. I wasn't keen on being the center of attention, and we believed redirecting funds towards travel and hobbies made more sense than a lavish ceremony. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law, who conducted free cooking classes as a hobby, proposed a dinner party to celebrate our marriage. Excited to showcase her culinary skills, she warmly welcomed John but exhibited a noticeable coldness toward me. Despite the confusion, the dinner party proceeded with a variety of exquisite dishes prepared by her, momentarily overshadowing the earlier sense of unwelcome. Expressing gratitude for the delightful meals, I thought the initial discomfort might have been a misunderstanding. However, that night, severe stomach pain struck suddenly, leading to a rushed visit to the emergency room. Despite inconclusive diagnosis due to the absence of a specialist, my condition stabilized after receiving IV treatment for 2 hours. The cause of my distress, possibly linked to expired bread consumed earlier, remained a mystery. After returning home with John, I found myself grappling with unexplained stomach pain every time I dined at my in-laws' place following a particular incident. Seeking advice, I discussed this issue over lunch with a long-lost friend. She suggested, could it be that simply visiting your husband's house is causing you stress? Surprisingly, she had experienced a similar situation, falling ill due to harassment from her mother-in-law. After relocating to a new apartment further away, her health improved significantly. Although I hadn't initially considered visits to my in-laws as a source of stress, my friend's advice made me ponder if there was an underlying unease in my heart. Concerned about my recurring illnesses, my husband, who had initially brushed off the matter, began to take it seriously. Consequently, he suggested that we temporarily halt our visits to my in-laws. While the exact cause remained elusive, my husband suspected his mother's cooking, given my consistent bouts of illness after meals there. According to him, his mother often expressed loneliness and a desire for shared meals, but he had declined due to his worry for my health. Despite our decision to refrain from visiting, a new challenge emerged. My brother-in-law was scheduled to visit our parents for his wedding greetings, and a family dinner was arranged. Reluctantly, my husband explained, I can't decline this time, as my brother is going to our parents' place. We're expected to participate in the dinner meeting with the entire family. Despite my inclination to avoid a direct encounter with my mother-in-law, I couldn't neglect the familial obligation tied to my brother-in-law and his wife. Deciding to participate in the family dinner, little did anyone anticipate the ensuing commotion it would cause. Despite my husband's concern for my health, he advised me, Alice, you don't have to eat the meals today. As we arrived at the dinner meeting, my mother-in-law greeted us with her usual warm smile, particularly directed at my husband. However, I couldn't help but sense an even colder attitude towards me compared to before. Upon entering the room, my brother-in-law and his wife were engaged in a pleasant conversation with my father-in-law. My mother-in-law's homemade dishes were beautifully presented on the table, emitting an enticing aroma that stirred my appetite. The mystery persisted. Why did I fall ill after consuming these seemingly delicious meals? No matter how I pondered, the reason eluded me. Seated at the table, my mother-in-law promptly urged me to start eating. Swiftly, my husband intervened, stating that I wasn't feeling well. However, she seemed to dismiss my condition as a minor issue, offering me a dish with a wordless smile, almost challenging me to eat. Feeling at a loss for words, my brother-in-law came to my defense, expressing gratitude for my presence despite my illness. He suggested it was sufficient to exchange greetings and encouraged me to go home and rest if needed. Informed in advance by my husband, he and his wife stood by my side. Ignoring their son's words, my mother-in-law insisted on packaging the dish in a Tupperware for me to try later. Wondering why she was so insistent on my eating, I nodded to avoid upsetting her. As she went to the kitchen to fetch the Tupperware, a loud clatter interrupted the scene. All eyes turned to my father-in-law, who was clutching his stomach in pain despite not having started his meal. In a panic, my mother-in-law asked what happened, and he, in agony, replied, My stomach hurts so much I can't bear it. The cause of his suffering remained unclear, adding another layer of tension to the already tumultuous dinner. I had only taken a few nibbles from the kitchen before the gathering, and suddenly my father-in-law collapsed weakly. Disbelief struck me as my mother-in-law, panicked, exclaimed, "You must be joking. That was something I made to feed Alice." "Wait, this is not the time to think about that. Call an ambulance." Without hesitation, she dialed for an ambulance and rushed to the hospital with my father-in-law. We all stood frozen, staring, processing the unexpected turn of events. However, her earlier words lingered in my mind, the revelation that what my father-in-law had snacked on was intended for me. It implied there might be something wrong with that particular dish. Driven by concern, I headed to the kitchen, a place my mother-in-law had always kept me away from. There, I discovered something that left me in shock, finally understanding why I would fall ill and why my father-in-law had collapsed. The realization that she would do something like this struck me as utterly absurd. Reeling from the revelation, I knew I had to decide how to handle this betrayal. Forgiveness wasn't an option, revenge became a necessity. Each of us drove to the hospital where my father-in-law was taken. After checking in at the reception, we headed straight for the patient room. Inside, we could hear two voices, one unmistakably my mother-in-law's, and the other likely a male doctor. She was being questioned about what had happened. "I'm telling you, I don't know anything. He just suddenly collapsed while we were all enjoying the meals," my mother-in-law insisted. The doctor probed further, asking if he had consumed anything rotten or expired. Evading the questions, my mother-in-law continued to deny any knowledge. Summoning courage, I took a deep breath and knocked on the hospital room door. Flustered, my mother-in-law greeted us. "Oh, Alice and John, you're here too. Your father is okay. Please go home and enjoy dinner with the four of you." However, her somewhat flustered manner and attempt to close the door heightened my suspicions. I seized the moment and asserted, "No, I'd like to talk to you for a bit." Behind me, my husband silently projected his presence, while my brother-in-law and his wife sent sharp, cold glances. Faced with this collective insistence, my mother-in-law couldn't refuse and reluctantly said, "Okay." Allowing us into the room, my father-in-law's facial color appeared to be returning, showing signs of stability. However, the exact cause remained undetermined. Though he was still conscious when brought to the hospital, he had been frequently using the bathroom. The doctor explained that he eventually lost consciousness due to dehydration. Attempting to offer an excuse, my mother-in-law forced a smile, saying, "Well, your father is getting old, and he drinks beer every day." Her attempt at justification seemed feeble, and realizing that neither the doctor nor we were convinced, she fell silent, closing her mouth. I looked at my mother-in-law with a stern gaze, took evidence out of my bag, and presented it to her. As she observed the contents, her eyes widened, and she broke into a cold sweat, visibly confused. "Mother-in-law, isn't this a laxative? I found some powdered laxatives in the kitchen. What's this about?" I inquired calmly, but she remained silent. The doctor, examining the laxatives, seemed to understand. "Oh, that would make sense if he had diarrhea without being food poisoned. Generally, intake of laxatives is a possibility," he explained. Subsequent detailed examinations revealed that my father-in-law had indeed ingested a significant amount of laxatives. The final diagnosis pointed to the laxatives making his intestines hyperactive, causing repeated abdominal pain, diarrhea, and ultimately dehydration. Cornered and unable to make excuses any longer, my mother-in-law hesitated before finally saying, "Wait. At first, I only expected Alice to get a little sick. But because Alice was fine, I gradually increased the amount of laxatives." The confession laid bare the motive for her actions, a sense of loss over her perceived detachment of her beloved eldest son from her. Starting with a small amount of laxatives out of spite, she admitted to progressively escalating the dosage, ultimately reaching a point where it caused a person to collapse. My surprise was impossible to conceal as I confronted my mother-in-law, stating, "What you've done is just crazy. You may not know this, but I've been to the hospital multiple times for IVs due to unexplained symptoms. Despite this, I can't understand why you would attempt to mix in such a huge amount of laxatives." Unable to find room for argument after having her mistake pointed out, my mother-in-law hung her head in frustration. A series of criticisms followed from her sons. "Mom, no matter the circumstances, this can't be forgiven. It just so happens that Alice didn't respond that sensitively to the laxatives." "But what you've done is the same as a crime," my husband exclaimed. His words were echoed by my brother-in-law, who expressed, "I thought it was unthinkable, but were you trying to do the same thing to my wife? Thinking about it that way is really scary." He pulled his wife closer, throwing a stern gaze at his mother. The doctor intervened, emphasizing, "Medication should be used in the proper amounts and methods, as your son said. Luckily, your daughter-in-law's symptoms were mild, but your husband had no resistance to laxatives, thus resulting in this severe reaction." Unable to bear the criticism, my mother-in-law, despite her age, began to cry like a small child. From the bed, a voice was heard, my father-in-law, who had regained consciousness. He exclaimed, "How could you do such a terrible thing?" Crying, my mother-in-law grasped his hand, apologizing, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." However, he forcefully shook off her hand. Frozen in place, shocked by the unfolding events, my mother-in-law witnessed my father-in-law letting out a deep sigh. He continued, "Even if you didn't intend to hurt me, it's a fact that you've caused Alice to suffer a lot. That's not right. It's a shameful act as a human being." In response to his words, my mother-in-law begged for forgiveness, clinging to him. She turned to me, apologizing for her actions and pledging never to repeat such behavior. Seeking my forgiveness, she expressed hope that my husband and the boys would also be convinced. Witnessing this emotional scene, I found myself torn between the desire for retribution and the possibility of forgiveness. I cynically thought it must be a performance, and she wasn't genuinely remorseful about what she had done to me, so I smirked. "Ah, what are you talking about? I'm not even considering forgiving you now after all I've been through," I asserted. In solidarity, my husband stood beside me and added, "Mother, stay away from Alice. I can no longer think of someone who hurt my beloved wife as family." The declaration stunned my mother-in-law, causing her to collapse to her knees, rejected as family by her own son. Observing the scene, my brother-in-law nodded and stated firmly, "I can't imagine living with someone who could potentially harm my wife. I have no intention of you being my family anymore." His words echoed an unanimous sentiment against her. As my mother-in-law continued to beg for forgiveness, broken down in tears, no one uttered a word. Everyone simply looked down at her, realizing that her selfish jealousy had caused this situation. Desperate for support, she turned to my father-in-law, seemingly forgetting he had already rejected her. Sobbing, she implored, "What about you? You won't abandon me, your wife, will you?" However, my father-in-law retorted, "What of it? I can't stay with someone who commits such inhumane acts anymore. I want a divorce." Crushed by his words, my mother-in-law was left devastated. Agreeing with my husband's suggestion to let my father-in-law rest, we bid farewell to him and exited the hospital room. While waiting for my husband to retrieve the car at the entrance, my mother-in-law, panting, suddenly ran towards us. "Begging you, Alice, please forgive me," she pleaded. Looking at her tear-streaked and snotty face, I responded, "I have no reason to risk my life to be with you, mother-in-law. If I forgive you now, I don't think it will truly be for your benefit." I responded coldly to my mother-in-law, and just as I finished speaking, my husband arrived in the car. We got in, and through the window, I told my mother-in-law, "This is goodbye. We will likely never meet again. Take care." Her response to my cold words was silence. She watched us leave, her hand brushing against her sleeve, murmuring something as if in prayer while looking up at the sky. True to my father-in-law's declaration, he divorced and moved out. In the aftermath, my husband and brother-in-law severed ties with their mother. Previously, my father-in-law had been the leaseholder and paid the rent for the apartment. However, since he left after the divorce, I had to start paying the rent myself. My mother-in-law, having been a housewife all her life, struggled to figure out how to earn a living. Despite trying to make ends meet with the money she received from the property division in the divorce, it quickly ran out. Attempts to charge for her cooking classes and outreach for various work opportunities failed, with the news of the incident spreading and leaving her with no students. Consequently, she couldn't pay the rent, was evicted from her home, and only then did she grasp the harshness of reality. Now homeless, my mother-in-law began looking for work, facing the difficulties of life without a place to live. This, as people say, is karma. Shortly after being released from my unexplained illness, I found out that I was pregnant. My husband and father-in-law, despite the divorce, remained in contact. Upon hearing about my pregnancy, my father-in-law was overjoyed, even more so than we were. He had already prepared a stroller and car seat for us, a gesture that truly felt like a blessing. Discovering a playful side to my previously silent father-in-law, I am filled with joy as a family member. What's more, my brother-in-law and his wife had twins, unexpectedly expanding our family. Our lives became more lively, and I am genuinely looking forward to our new life with our new family members and the fresh days ahead.
I have no intention of taking care of Grandma. I don't even want to see her face. Why don't you do it, Lily? My sister-in-law said with a malicious grin. She probably thought that if she could take control of the house, she wouldn't have to worry about Grandma at all. My brother smirked beside her, glancing at me and Grandma. I could see it would be hard for Grandma to find peace in such an environment. It's okay, Grandma. I'm here for you, I said confidently. My name is Amy. I've just turned 50 and am now enjoying a slow-paced life with my husband. Our 2 children have grown up and are following their own paths. The days when I juggled work and family while they were little seem like distant, tender memories now. Today, my life revolves around my work with my husband and the time I spend with my grandmother. My husband, Terry, and I run a well-known traditional restaurant. I manage the business as the owner, while Terry, a skilled chef, supports the establishment with his culinary expertise. I chose this path because I studied business in college and was fascinated by restaurant management. Initially, I wanted to cook for our guests, but things didn't go as planned, and I quickly shifted focus. During college, I started a kitchen job at a luxury hotel near the university, but my cooking skills were lacking. A senior coworker told me I couldn't even peel vegetables properly, so I was reassigned to serving. Although it was a blow, it's now a funny memory we laugh about. Whenever I faced challenges, I turned to my grandmother. She would listen quietly until I finished, then look me in the eye and say, "Amy, I know your dreams and hopes, but life isn't always a straight path. There are detours and bends, and each of these experiences helps you grow. Go at your own pace and stay strong." Her words were a comforting balm. Thank you, Grandma. No matter how small the step, I'll keep moving forward, I'd say, always buoyed by her gentle encouragement. Having lost my parents early on, she was my greatest comfort and cherished treasure. In the midst of all this, I met my husband, Terry. He was a chef at the hotel where I worked part-time, having mastered cooking over the years. Knowing about my passion for cooking, he approached me and said, "I'm still learning myself, but I'll teach you everything I know if you're interested." I was thrilled and eagerly accepted. From there, we started with the basics, cooking together at each other's homes. The hotel's kitchen was often occupied, so we practiced at home, creating our own private cooking class. As we cooked and stirred pots together, our relationship grew deeper. Before long, we were seriously dating, and after a few years, we got married. Even after marriage, Terry continued to pursue his passion at the hotel kitchen, while I joined a startup, overseeing several restaurants to understand the practical aspects of business management. The theories I learned in university and real-world experience were worlds apart. Despite the challenges, I gradually got the hang of managing a business. With the support of my company, we were given the opportunity to run the upscale traditional restaurant we had always dreamed of. I took on the role of manager, setting up the restaurant and inviting Terry to lead the kitchen. After completing his training, he was eager for a new challenge and happily accepted. Together, we nurtured and grew our restaurant, but my deep involvement in work meant I regrettably spent less time with my dear grandmother. Now, Grandma lives with my brother Colin. He's a serious office worker with a somewhat troublesome personality. When I excitedly told him about my new role as manager through a company program, his reaction was unexpectedly cold. Wait, are you seriously taking such a risk? Wouldn't it be more secure to remain a regular employee? Besides, managers hired like that don't earn much, do they? He asked with a skeptical look. Colin, isn't that a bit harsh? I tried to counter, but his stance was firm. Amy, listen closely. Stability is the most important thing. Why are you so intent on doing as you please? Not just you, but your husband too. Don't you realize how tough it is to run a business? What will you do if you fail? His words left me taken aback. Sure, running a business might be hard, but we had the support of the company. It wasn't entirely on us. Then, with a somewhat malicious grin, my brother's wife, Lily, chimed in. You two are quite daring, aren't you? But if things go south, don't come running to us for help. Her comment made me silently vow never to rely on them, no matter what. The reason my beloved grandmother ended up with such a mean sister-in-law began when my brother and his wife suddenly moved in. I discovered this during one of my visits. When I rang the doorbell, Lily answered, looking surprised. "Oh, Amy, what are you doing here?" she asked. I was taken aback and blurted out, "Lily, why are you at Grandma's?" Taking a deep breath, Lily smiled and said, "Well, I'll let you in on a secret. Recently, I've been taking care of Grandma here. I wanted to spend more quality time with her, so we decided to move in." She seemed quite proud of herself. Admittedly, with a new restaurant and everything else, I had been too absorbed to notice the change. I had been extremely busy lately, which left me with less time for Grandma. With Lily spending more time at home, she had probably been looking out for her. "Thank you, Lily. It's really a big help," I said, though a pang of sadness hit me at the thought of missing time with my grandmother. When I dropped by Grandma's house, Lily often greeted me with a hint of sarcasm. "Oh, Amy, you're here again. Think Grandma's quite busy, you know. But then, this is Grandma's house," she remarked. I would respond with a smile. "Sorry, I just wanted to chat with Grandma." Visiting Grandma's house every weekend was my joy. She always welcomed me with a warm smile, but lately, I had noticed she wasn't her usual energetic self. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but one day my fears became a reality. When I knocked on Grandma's door and received no answer, I gently opened it to find her collapse at the entrance. In shock, I rushed to her side, shouting, "Grandma, are you okay?" I immediately called an ambulance and she was taken to the hospital. I accompanied her, and before I knew it, night had fallen. After some time, a doctor called me in to discuss her condition. He began with the ominous words, "She doesn't have much time left." I was devastated and struggled to process the news, but I understood that Grandma was gravely ill. It turned out that this was her regular hospital, and the doctor explained that her condition was beyond surgical intervention. It was best for her to rest at home. While absorbing this news, I received word that Grandma had regained consciousness. I hurried to her room, where she greeted me with a weak smile. "Amy, I'm sorry for surprising you," she said, her voice faint but warm. Through my tears, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me earlier, Grandma?" She replied softly, "I didn't want to worry anyone." At that moment, I felt the profound depth of Grandma's strength and kindness. I decided to cherish the time we had left and spend more quality moments with Grandma. "How about we tell everyone about your illness?" I gently suggested to her. She seemed a bit surprised by the idea but agreed. I hoped my brother and his wife would appreciate the chance to be with Grandma in her remaining days. A few days later, Grandma was discharged from the hospital. However, this didn't signify improvement. She was sent home because there were no more treatment options available. When we arrived at Grandma's house, my brother and Lily were lounging in the living room, their expressions relaxed. Lily, with a cheerful tone, remarked, "Where have you been? It's been so relaxing here while Grandma was away." My brother chuckled and nodded. "It's been refreshing to have some peace and quiet without Grandma's voice around." I was taken aback by their comments. One look at Grandma, and it was clear how serious her condition was. Trying to keep my emotions in check, I said, "Stop with the jokes. Grandma's condition is very serious. They can't treat her at the hospital anymore." Both my brother and Lily looked stunned. My brother, clearly in disbelief, asked. You're joking, right? Lily seemed to dismiss my words with indifference. Taking a deep breath, I told them firmly, it's true. If you don't believe me, you can ask Grandma's primary doctor directly. With a frail voice, Grandma added, actually, I don't have much time left. There's not much I can do from now on. Lily's eyes widened in surprise. Wait, I didn't sign up to be a caregiver. I'm just living here to save on rent. I can't handle such a huge responsibility, she said, her voice tinged with annoyance. I was incredulous at her words. Grandma's eyes filled with deep sadness as she whispered to herself, so I'm a burden now. It was clear that Lily and my brother were only concerned with their own comfort, disregarding Grandma's feelings. Holding Grandma's hand, I comforted her. It's okay, Grandma. I'm here for you. This is your house, and we should prioritize your well-being. I told Lily firmly, but she remained stubborn, showing no sign of changing her mind. I'm sorry, Amy, Lily finally said, though it was clear she wasn't truly remorseful. I was taken aback by their attitudes. Grandma, wiping away her tears, apologized, and I felt a deep urge to protect her. Lily's gaze was filled with annoyance, as if dealing with us was a burden. Can you just leave? Honestly, I get distracted with you guys around. Don't come asking for help later because I won't be inclined to assist, she said, her tone sharp. Seriously, just thinking about Grandma gives me a headache. Don't try to shift the responsibility onto us, my brother added, glancing at Grandma with evident irritation. It was clear that the inconvenience was on their side. Yet, as soon as they learned about Grandma's condition, their only thought was to get rid of her. Their attitude filled me with a heavy sadness. We won't be speaking to Lily or you anymore. Our family relationship ends here. If anything happens later, don't rely on us, Grandma said, her voice trembling and her eyes misty. I won't come to this house anymore. Goodbye. Great, even if Amy gets into trouble somewhere, we won't be involved. My brother smirked. If Amy is in trouble, it's none of our concern. Do your best with Grandma, Lily said with a dismissive wave. With that, Grandma and I left the house. I decided to take her to my place in a taxi and start a new chapter together. As the taxi door opened, Grandma's eyes widened in surprise. Oh, what a magnificent house, she exclaimed, clearly impressed. Indeed, our home was larger and more glamorous than where Grandma had been living. The company we work for is unique. In addition to our regular wages, we receive bonuses based on the restaurant's revenue. This generous system was designed to motivate employees, providing us with a stable and comfortable lifestyle. As I was lost in thought, the front door opened gently to reveal Terry with a warm smile. Welcome back. I've been waiting, he greeted cheerfully. I had texted Terry about Grandma's arrival, and he had thoughtfully prepared tea for us. After such a long time, Grandma was delighted to see Terry again, her face lighting up with a warm smile. I led her into the living room and served her some of the comforting tea. As she sipped it, she looked visibly relieved and took a deep breath, saying, "This place feels like somewhere I can comfortably spend my remaining days. At the other house, I felt like I was just in the way." Her words carried a hint of sadness, and I could sense the coldness she had experienced from Lily and my brother. My shock grew when I learned that Lily had been taking Grandma's pension money without permission. Could Lily really do that? I muttered under my breath, and Terry, equally shocked, said, "I can't believe it. We can't let this go." I felt the same way. "We should give them a taste of their own medicine," Terry said passionately. I nodded in agreement. "Yes, let's take some action." A few days later, I received several calls from my brother. After waiting a while, I answered to find Lily's angry voice on the other end. "Hello? Why the constant calls?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "It's about Grandma's house. We've been asked to leave suddenly." "This is your doing, isn't it?" Lily shot back. Trying to hide my amusement, I replied, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Her distress was evident as she said, "Wait, why would she do that suddenly? Did you and Terry plan this?" "No, we didn't do anything," I said calmly. "Grandma decided to sell the house because it was in her name all along. We were surprised too, but she simply wanted to move on. The sale has already been finalized and there's a new owner. Staying there longer might cause issues." Lily's voice was filled with a mix of shock and confusion. "Do you think Grandma really understands what's going on? Did you guys offer her some sort of sweet deal?" "No, we didn't do anything of the sort," I assured her. "Grandma just wanted a fresh start." Terry spoke with the real estate agency right away. and Grandma agreed to the sale because she didn't want to deal with you and Colin anymore. As I spoke, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Let's find a new path and build our lives separately, I added, ready to move forward and leave the past behind. I ignored Lily's frustration and tried to stay positive. Where are we supposed to live now? Our previous flat is gone. Lily's voice quivered with anger. From what I gathered from Grandma, Lily had a penchant for shopping, always flaunting the latest designer bags and frequenting beauty spas and salons nearly every week. My brother's income, on the other hand, wasn't particularly high, and with their old debts, their financial situation must be quite strained. Despite their challenges, my brother seemed infatuated with Lily's beauty and probably indulged her every whim, which is why they had moved into Grandma's house to save on expenses. To be honest, I wasn't overly concerned about their situation, so I playfully suggested, why not try staying in a motel for a while? Oh, but it might be tough if you're short on money. Lily paused, then replied in surprise, why are you talking about our financial situation? I didn't get any response from my brother at that moment. Later, Grandma took the phone and, smiling, said, actually, I told Amy everything. And by the way, Amy's house is really nice, spacious with the latest appliances and very comfortable. It's completely different from what you're used to. My brother seemed intrigued by Grandma's words. When he took the phone, he asked, why are you guys so rich? I thought you were struggling financially. It might surprise you, but aside from our regular salaries, we also receive a substantial bonus. Roughly speaking, we probably earn about twice what you make in a month. Both of us work hard and live comfortably, I said with a hint of pride. He was silent for a moment, clearly taken aback. Seriously? Yes, I confirmed. You always said full-time employment is the best, but maybe you should broaden your horizons. We seem to be managing quite well with our approach. I advised them coolly, you need to sort things out on your own without relying on us. Lily's sweet voice then surprised me with a request. Hey Amy, could we visit your place, just your brother and me, even if it's just for a short while? Taken aback by her proposal, I firmly replied, no, I've already told you that we're done. Figure things out on your own. They tried calling me several times afterward, but I had nothing to discuss and chose not to answer. I decided they were no longer part of my life. Soon after, I received unexpected news. My brother and Lily had been arrested for shoplifting from a small store. From the police, I learned about Lily's enormous debts, which far exceeded what my brother's salary could cover. She had even been siphoning money from Grandma's pension. Debt collectors had gone to my brother's workplace, which forced him to leave his job. Their financial situation deteriorated rapidly, and they were reduced to stealing donuts and sandwiches to eat. The police informed me that, during their arrest, both my brother and Lily had pleaded with them to reach out to me. My brother said, I know we've done wrong, but please help us. Lily tearfully begged, forgive our past mistakes and help us just this once. Despite their pleas, I couldn't easily forgive them. Their reckless spending and neglect of Grandma had led to serious consequences. I believed they were now facing the outcomes of their own decisions. Months have passed since then, but my feelings remain unchanged. Grandma is still lively and enjoys each day, which brings me comfort. I've taken time off work to spend quality moments with her, and I'm grateful that my company is supportive during times like these. Though Grandma occasionally feels unwell, we find joy in our walks through the garden and in our conversations about the flowers. These moments are precious to me. Grandma, your birthday is coming up. Is there anything special you'd like to eat? I asked with a smile. She replied, I'd love a sandwich made by you. Although my cooking isn't exceptional, her kind request touched me deeply. I still have many places to show her, foods to taste together, and stories to share. I cherish every heartwarming moment with her and strive to make her smile as much as possible while she's feeling better.
Ending our marriage was undoubtedly the right decision. You and your child remain as pitiable as ever. Despite earning $200,000 a year, my ex-husband seems more interested in boasting about himself than addressing our situation. He introduces me to his new wife, Harriet, leaving me bewildered about his thought process. As I attempt to leave, my ex-husband blocks my path and questions whether my apparent jealousy stems from their perceived happiness. His condescending remark about my financial status doesn't sit well with me. Feeling a mix of disgust and exasperation, I maintain my silence. However, my son Johnny intervenes, suggesting that we fire this guy. Fast forward to the present. I am Lisa, 42 years old, married to George, a former co-worker since I was 26. After working and quitting when I became pregnant, I contemplate returning to the workforce as Johnny begins elementary school. George, eager for me to find employment, is persistent in his suggestions and preferences for my work hours. Although initially supportive, George's true colors begin to show when I start a part-time job. A few months into my new job, a shocking message arrives on my phone from a former colleague, revealing my husband's affair with a woman from our company, the daughter of the division manager. The accompanying pictures leave me deeply shaken. As the gossip unfolds, I decide to respond with thanks and close the messaging app, grappling with the unexpected turn of events. I never fathomed that my husband could be unfaithful, but as I reflected on recent events, everything fell into place. His persistent push for me to work harder, even when childcare arrangements were not settled, now made sense. He likely saw it as an opportunity to have more freedom for his affair. Today, he claims to be on an overnight business trip, but I suspect it's a cover for quality time with his mistress. Confronting him the next day, I couldn't maintain a facade of composure. I presented the incriminating pictures, expecting some form of excuse. However, his response shocked me. Acknowledging his infidelity without remorse, he explained that the woman was the division manager's daughter, and marrying her would secure his promotion. He coldly compared her to me, emphasizing her youth and attractiveness. His lack of guilt and blatant disrespect left me disappointed. Instead of apologizing, he suggested an expedited divorce. Unable to feign indifference, I agreed for the sake of my mental well-being and swiftly settled for child support and property division. With custody of Johnny, he left callously, advising me to scrape by on a single income while he joined the ranks of the wealthy through his impending marriage. Though mentally relieved, daily life posed new challenges. Despite the financial support, my savings were modest, and I had to transition from part-time to full-time work. Johnny's after-school programs became a necessity, adding to the complexity of our lives. The unfamiliarity of a full-time job, coupled with the sole responsibility for housework, made every day a struggle. As the years passed, adaptation became a constant companion. Now, 7 years post-divorce, with Johnny in middle school, life has settled into a rhythm. He can mostly take care of himself, allowing me to reflect on the resilience developed through the challenges and changes life threw our way. I think he's grown into a very responsible boy compared to other boys his age, perhaps because I'm always so busy. He even takes on the responsibilities of cooking and doing laundry for me. Thanks to him, I've been free from housework and childcare, and for the past few years, I've had time for myself. Both my personal and working life are going very well. Now I can say it clearly, I'm certainly glad I broke up with that awful man. If I had continued to be married to him, I wouldn't have this life now. However, one day, while my son and I were shopping at the local mall, I ran into that terrible guy, my ex-husband, George. I didn't notice him, but he started talking to me. "Hey, isn't that you, Lisa? Long time no see. You've really aged. Is that what you say to someone you haven't seen in a while?" A person with normal sensitivity would never say that to a woman. I could tell in an instant that he hadn't grown at all as a person. Within a few seconds of meeting him, annoyance crept in, and I snapped back. "Huh? You're the one who's aged a lot. I didn't recognize you for a moment." Honestly, George had aged a lot. I hadn't seen him for 7 years, but it felt like he aged twice as much. His hair was thinning, and his belly protruded, showing a complete middle-aged figure. I thought talking to my ex-husband was a waste of time, so I tried to walk away, saying, "Oh well, long time no see. But I don't really have anything to say to you. See you later." However, he wouldn't let me go. He stood in my way and started talking nonsense. Hey, don't be so cold. The family is all together again. Let's catch up for a bit. I didn't want to hear anything about his life. If there's one thing I'd like to complain about, it's that he stopped paying child support a few years after our divorce. Child support is not my right, but Johnny's right. The fact that he could talk so openly in front of Johnny, who was owed that money, made me irritated. But George didn't care about my mood at all. He started talking about his recent life, which I didn't want to hear. After our divorce, I remarried. I married the daughter of the manager who was in that picture with me. Oh, he's not a manager anymore. He's an executive now. And I got promoted to manager. I'm definitely winning now. To be honest, I don't care how much George has been promoted. It has nothing to do with me, and I'm not envious. All I thought was, why are you bragging about not paying child support even after being promoted? He's such a cheap man to not even pay a few $1,000s a month, even though he's winning. And to rub it in even more, George continued his bragging. Breaking up with you was the right choice. You and your son still look poor. I make $200,000 a year. In the end, George just wanted to brag about himself. He didn't even try to hear about our lives. I thought that any normal parent would be curious about their child's life. But he didn't even talk to Johnny, who was standing right in front of him. He's really a terrible father. Oh, that reminds me. Let me introduce you. Hey. George called over a woman who was looking at clothes in the distance. The woman came over, and I knew right away who she was. I had seen her in a picture before. It was George's new wife, Harriet. Meet my wife, Harriet. How about that? She's way more beautiful than you, isn't she? He introduced me to his new wife. What was he thinking? This woman stole my husband when we were married. I'm glad we're apart now. But back then, it was shocking, and I did resent it at the time. I have no good impression of this woman at all. You'd think my ex-husband would know that, even though he's not the brightest, but he must be really looking down on us. He seems not to have the brains to realize even that. Oh, is that all? I don't have time. Bye-bye, I said, feeling extremely unpleasant. Of course, I don't even glance at the woman, let alone greet her. Wait a minute. As I was about to leave, he blocked my path again. I wanted to leave the scene as soon as possible so I wouldn't retort, but my ex-husband stood in front of me, blocking my path. Stop it. There's no point in hearing about your home life. Jealous because we look happy. You're not just poor in money. Don't be bitter in your heart too. You'll only get more miserable. My ex-husband arbitrarily decides that I'm unhappy. Mind your own business. I'm perfectly happy, so leave me alone. The most unfortunate thing lately is being spoken to by you. Even though I say I'm happy, my ex-husband doesn't believe it at all and arbitrarily worries about my situation. Well, happiness varies from person to person, but being poor isn't happy. Don't push yourself. It's probably impossible for you to remarry with those conditions. I'm worried about you as your ex-husband, you know. Saying that, my ex-husband's face showed an expression completely opposite to concern. He's making a complete fool of me. When I looked at the face of my ex-husband's wife standing next to him, she was also smirking, looking like she's making fun of me. I'll never be friends with this woman. She feels good by looking down on people. She's the worst kind of woman. You'd think my ex-husband would know that, even though he's not the brightest, but he must be really looking down on us. He seems not to have the brains to realize even that. Oh, is that all? I don't have time. Bye-bye, I said, feeling extremely unpleasant. Of course, I didn't even glance at the woman, let alone greet her. As I was about to leave, he blocked my path again. I'll tell you, we're still in love, so the chance of getting back together is 0. Don't get your hopes up for something wrong. My ex-husband seems to be having some wild delusion. He thinks I'm still attached to him, even though it's been 7 years since our divorce due to his affair. His head is so full of fantasies that I can't say anything. When I was at a loss for words because of my ex-husband's ridiculous delusion, he seemed to think he was right. Hey, too shocked to say anything? Being a popular man is tough. What's popular about a middle-aged man's appearance? I'm past anger and starting to feel sick. When I was silent, my ex-husband tried to say something more, but Johnny interrupted him. Mom, can you fire this guy? Huh? My ex-husband was dumbfounded by Johnny's incomprehensible words. It seems that Johnny is very angry, calling me this guy instead of Dad. Well, it doesn't matter, but what do you mean? I'm not getting fired, am I? You're in middle school now. Study properly. He talked down to Johnny too. It's unforgivable that he's making fun of my beloved son as well. I was about to explode with anger at my ex-husband when I heard a voice calling me. Hey, what's going on here? A man came over calling out. My ex-husband froze when he saw the man's face. Why are you here, boss? My ex-husband asked the man in front of him. I'm just here shopping with my family. Are you saying I shouldn't be here? No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way, but I was just wondering why you were talking to my ex-wife. Oh, that's natural. She's my current wife, after all. What? Her. No, this is your wife, boss. I can't believe. Actually, about 3 years ago, I remarried with the CEO of my deceased husband's company, with whom I had lost my wife. The CEO and I became close after my divorce when he approached me while I was shopping at the supermarket. Since I had previously worked at the same company as my ex-husband, I knew the CEO. The CEO knew that my ex-husband had an affair with the head of his department's daughter, leading to our divorce, and that he later married her. It seemed that the CEO was quite bitter about this as a fellow man. But he thought he couldn't meddle in an employee's private life until he saw me at the supermarket and impulsively spoke to me. I was very surprised since I knew the CEO, but I didn't think he would remember my face and name as just an ordinary employee. Perhaps he remembered me easily because I worked at the reception desk of the company. It seems your marriage didn't work out, but I'm sure you'll find someone better soon. CEO, I'm glad you remember me, but you don't have to worry about me. I'm fine. At that time, I had been divorced for less than a year, so I was somewhat putting on a brave face, but the CEO, with his vast life experience, saw right through my act and comforted me with kind words. Divorce takes more than 3 times the effort of marriage. Even if you divorce smoothly, it's tiring. I've never been divorced, but I felt utterly unmotivated when I lost my wife to death. When a man and woman who once loved each other part ways, that's just how it is, so you don't need to put on a brave face. The CEO knew the loneliness of ending a married life. Indeed, while I was glad to have separated, I was also feeling a whirlpool of emotions like loneliness and emptiness at the time. So his words touched my heart. If talking to someone like me helps, call me anytime. I'll treat you to dinner whenever you like, he said, handing me his business card. I thought it would be too bold to contact him for about 2 years, but as time passed, I calmed down and wanted someone to talk to again, so I finally decided to call the CEO. Despite his busy schedule, the CEO made time for me and treated me to dinner. When I was an employee, the CEO was still a department head, and he had an unapproachable aura since he was the previous CEO's son. But once we had dinner together, I found him easy to talk to, like a nice uncle. Perhaps because I was no longer an employee, the CEO and I quickly became good drinking buddies. Then, about a year passed, and the CEO proposed to me with a serious look. You're kidding, Steve? Don't joke like that. I was told while drinking, so I thought it was a joke, but the CEO was serious. At first, I wanted to encourage you after your divorce, but being with you really calms me down. I haven't felt this way since I lost my wife. Honestly, I feel like I'm the one being healed now. If you're willing, let's spend the rest of our lives together. Give me a day to think about it, I said and consulted with my son. I don't mind. You should decide based on whether you like him or not, Mom. Since there was no particular opposition, I decided to marry the CEO. To be honest, I liked him. I thought he was just a drinking buddy. but I also felt truly healed when I was with him. We both felt comforted, so I thought there was no obstacle to living together. And when I heard the story about the president's deceased wife, I really understood that he loved her. Every time I heard that story, I thought about how happy. The aftermath of encountering my ex-husband at the shopping mall took an unexpected turn, leading to revelations and consequences I hadn't foreseen. When I revealed to my ex-husband and his wife that I had remarried the president of my deceased husband's company, their reactions were shock and disbelief. My ex-husband's demeanor changed, and he attempted to smooth things over, but it was clear that the president took Johnny's words seriously, especially given rumors about my ex-husband's behavior in the company. The president decided to investigate the matter further, despite my ex-husband's attempts to dissuade him. Even his wife couldn't prevent the investigation from proceeding, although she tried to distance her father from the situation. As the investigation unfolded, it revealed a pattern of misconduct including harassment, verbal abuse, favoritism, and exploitation of their positions for personal gain. My ex-husband and the executive faced demotion and relocation to a branch office. Eventually, they resigned from the company and faced legal repercussions, including lawsuits from employees they had mistreated. The downfall of my ex-husband and his wife's deteriorating marriage underscored the importance of living honestly and treating others with sincerity. Meanwhile, life continued for me and my family. Despite being 42, I welcomed a healthy baby, and Johnny embraced his role as a big brother with love and care. Looking at my newborn's peaceful face, I felt a sense of gratitude and determination. Despite the challenges of raising another child at my age, I was committed to working hard for my family's well-being and future. As I faced each day, I carried with me a deep sense of gratitude for the new life that had entered our world.
Mama hasn't eaten and she's collapsed. I received an urgent SOS from my 6-year-old granddaughter, who lives with my daughter and her husband. Her desperate call left me stunned. Mama had shared her own food with me, so she hadn't eaten anything herself. "Grandma, come quick. Help." My granddaughter's message was frantic, saying that my daughter could only moan weakly and seemed barely able to speak. I grabbed my car keys, praying for my daughter's safety, and rushed out of the house. What I found when I arrived was beyond anything I had prepared for. My name is Wendy, and I'm a 65-year-old housewife. Since my husband, who was 5 years older than me, passed away 2 years ago, I've been living alone in our now overly spacious home. Thanks to an inheritance from him and my own savings from working until I turned 60, I have no financial worries. My only daughter, Holly, is married and lives about an hour away with her husband. The highlights of my life are their occasional visits, especially when they bring my granddaughter, Lynn. After Holly graduated from university, she moved to Paris to pursue a career fueled by her passion for the French language. There she met Ted, who was working for an international company. They married and eventually returned to the United States. Once back, Holly chose to become a full-time homemaker to support Ted, and soon after, they welcomed their daughter, Lynn. Ted graduated from a prestigious university and now works for a leading tire company, which gives him an elite status, though he has faced many challenges along the way. His father struggled with job stability, frequently changing positions, which put a strain on their finances. Ted's mother worked part-time but didn't contribute significantly to the household income. Holly mentioned this hesitantly, suggesting that Ted's parents had unconventional approaches to work. Despite this, Ted was determined to improve his circumstances. He pursued his education with dedication, earning scholarships and working part-time to support himself. His hard work has earned him Holly's deep respect. Ted is committed to ensuring that Lynn doesn't face the same struggles he did. He is determined to save money and provide her with the freedom to choose her own path. She described him as a warm-hearted person. While it might seem self-serving to praise my own daughter, Holly truly is bright and kind-hearted. She has a good relationship with Ted, even though his parents are somewhat unconventional. Lynn has been growing up happily, and I had no cause for concern. However, there was a moment when I sensed something was wrong with Holly. It was when Lynn was 4 years old. During one of their visits, Holly appeared unusually drained. I asked, "What's wrong? You look pale. Are you feeling unwell, or is something bothering you?" "Well, there's a small concern," Holly admitted. She had been sending $700 a month to Ted's financially struggling parents, but they had recently asked for more without Ted knowing. It turns out my father-in-law had quit his job again. That's troubling. It's challenging for just you and Ted to bear this burden, I said. Holly wanted to save money for Lynn's future, but it was becoming difficult with the ongoing financial support for her in-laws. She considered getting a job, but Ted had told her, I often go on business trips, so I prefer you stay with Lynn. I want to support my parents since they're family, but I'm worried about how long we can sustain this situation. Hearing this, I felt uneasy and somewhat doubtful. I considered how I might assist and shared my idea with Ted. To my surprise, he welcomed the suggestion and agreed without hesitation. I was relieved at the time, but things didn't go as smoothly as hoped. 2 years later, a new issue emerged. Ted was assigned to work abroad and would be stationed there alone. His parents, concerned about Holly and Lynn managing on their own, proposed that they all move in together. Though Ted wanted to respect Holly's wishes, his parents' insistence made it difficult for her to refuse. Consequently, they decided to live together for the year until Ted's return. Knowing the challenges Holly had faced with her in-laws, I made it a point to stay in regular contact and check on her. It's okay, my father-in-law's new job seems to have a good environment. It might work out this time, and since Ted helped him find it, that's a positive sign. Despite her reassurance, a mother's intuition, or whatever you might call it, told me that something was off with Holly's tone. Then communication from her abruptly ceased. I tried reaching out multiple times, but all I got were voicemails and no replies. After 6 months of Ted being away, I finally managed to reconnect with Holly. Hello, Holly, I'm relieved to finally get through. Summer is almost over. How are you doing? I'm fine. I was hoping you and Lynn would visit during the summer vacation. Mom, I'm sorry. We've been really busy. I need to go now. I'll talk to you later. Wait, but before I could say more, the call abruptly ended. Holly's voice had sounded noticeably less upbeat. What's going on, Holly? I haven't seen you in over 6 months. Are you both really okay? My anxiety grew, and I realized I couldn't wait any longer. Just then, an unexpected call came through from Holly's phone. Mom doesn't have any food, and she's collapsed. The distressed voice of my granddaughter, Lynn, came through the line. Lynn, what's happening? I asked urgently. Mom gave her food to me, so she hasn't eaten anything. Grandma, please come help us. From the tearful voice on the phone, I could tell Holly was exhausted and struggling to communicate. Are there any adults around, like Grandpa or Grandma? If they find out I called, I'll be in trouble, Lynn said. That's when I recalled what Holly had mentioned. She had taught Lynn how to use her cell phone and delete the call history, so Lynn could expose the situation to Holly's in-laws if needed. Hold on, I'm on my way, I said, telling Lynn to stay somewhere safe. I quickly drove to the in-laws' house, my heart racing. Holly, I'm coming. As I drove, tears streamed down my face. I was filled with guilt for not realizing the situation sooner and seething with anger toward Holly's in-laws. What have they done to my precious daughter and granddaughter? I'll never forgive them. Fueled by my anger, I pressed the accelerator harder. When I arrived at the in-laws' house, I rang the doorbell, but there was no immediate response. After repeatedly pressing the button, a voice finally answered. Why are you ringing so much? Who is it? I'm Holly's mother. What? You didn't give any notice. Why are you here? It was clear Holly's father-in-law was surprised and hesitant to come to the door. I'm sorry for the unexpected visit, but I need to see Holly. May I come in? No. Holly and Lynn aren't here. Go home. I know they're here. Is there another reason you're not letting me in? Enough. Don't come back. Just then, a deep voice resonated from behind me. Before I could react, a man appeared in front of me. That voice, could it be? I heard sounds of movement from inside the house, and the front door opened to reveal a stunned father-in-law. Boss, what are you doing here? The man was the CEO of the company where Holly's father-in-law worked. After learning about the in-laws' financial demands from Holly, I had taken action discreetly. Without informing Holly, I reached out to Ted and introduced him to a company run by an old friend of mine. I wanted Holly's father-in-law to find employment there and achieve financial independence. The CEO, understating my requests, hired him under favorable conditions. To avoid any gratitude, I kept my connection with the CEO confidential, asking both Ted and the CEO to do the same. Sensing something was wrong after the earlier call, I contacted the CEO, and we rushed over together. The CEO said, "I'm here to speak with you. Let me in," and walked into the in-laws' home. The father-in-law stood there, stunned and speechless, as I tried to follow. Holly's mother-in-law emerged from a room and blocked my path. "You have no right to come in." The CEO quickly countered, "No, she's with me." The in-laws appeared visibly shaken and terrified. "Grandma, over here. Help mommy," Lynn's voice called out urgently. At that moment, Lynn rushed over and tugged at my hand. "Lynn, you become so skinny." I noticed that my granddaughter looked much more gaunt than the last time I had seen her. Before I could voice my concern, Lynn urgently guided me towards the back of the house, leading me to a storage room under the stairs. "Holly, in a place like this?" I quickly opened the door and gasped in shock and sorrow. There inside the dimly lit room was my emaciated daughter, Holly. "Mom," Holly murmured with drowsy eyes and tears streaming down her face. I gripped her frail hand tightly. "I'm so relieved you're okay. Lynn told me you'd collapsed. We need to get you to a doctor right away." As I gently tried to lift Holly, the CEO stepped in to help. "She doesn't need to see a doctor. Given her condition, are you really sure about that?" "We haven't done anything wrong," I responded, concerned. "Liars, Mom always worked hard while you both just relaxed. You only gave her a small amount of food, and she even gave her own portion to me." From a recent call with my granddaughter, I learned that since moving in together, Holly had been forced to handle all the household chores from morning till night, like a servant. Despite Holly's efforts to please what she thought were her beloved husband's parents, they criticized her relentlessly. They complained about her cooking, her cleaning, and her parenting. They punished her by cutting back her meals and would say, "If you can't do things properly, you belong in the storeroom." They even confiscated her mobile phone, purse, and bank book. Whenever she protested, they threatened to harm Lynn. I was horrified to discover this. Holly was enduring this abuse with her already limited food further reduced, all for Lynn's sake. Overwhelmed by constant unjust criticism and suffering from physical and mental exhaustion, Holly was unable to think clearly. "Why are you acting like the victim? We only scolded her a little. This is a serious matter. She could be in a life-threatening condition. I intend to get a medical report." "Don't exaggerate. Stay out of our family matters. It's a new. Holly is my cherished daughter, and so is Lynn. I can forgive you for what you've done to them." At that moment, Holly, clearly exhausted, suddenly broke down in tears. "Mom, please stop. I'm afraid Ted will hate me." "Holly, did he say something to you?" "He said he'd leave me and stop providing financial support." "That's strange. I just spoke with Ted, and he mentioned that he's been sending $3,500 every month." At this revelation, the defiant expressions of my in-laws shifted to visible anxiety. "It looks like you've been keeping the money Ted sent Holly for yourselves. You've been deceiving everyone. Does this mean the rumor about Ted having another girlfriend is also false? How could you drive Holly to this point? I will never forgive you for this." At that moment, the sound of the ambulance sirens approached, and the CEO went outside to direct the paramedics. As soon as he was out of sight, my father-in-law's demeanor shifted dramatically, and he gave me a cold, piercing stare. "It's our son's money. Naturally, we have the right to use it. There's no reason for us to give it to a daughter-in-law like you. If you can't accept that, you should take the child and leave." "So, this is why you've been harassing me almost every day, isn't it?" "Did you hear that, Ted?" I spoke into my smartphone. I was on a call with Holly's husband, Ted, and relaying every word his parents were saying. "What are you talking about?" I turned the smartphone screen towards the in-laws with the speakerphone on. "I will never forgive you for what you've done to my beloved family, my wife and child. I'm cutting off all support from now on." Ted's voice was filled with anger, and his parents could only tremble in response. My father-in-law bowed deeply towards the phone. "Ted, I'm so sorry. We needed the money and didn't mean any harm. This isn't a joke. I'll be home soon, so be prepared." The CEO, returning with the paramedics, added sternly, "There's no point in keeping such a ruthless man employed. I brought him in for Wendy's sake, but he's been a disappointment." Upon hearing this, the in-laws immediately shifted their demeanor, bowing and apologizing profusely to me. "We apologize for how we've treated Holly. We're struggling financially and desperately need your help. Could you please talk to Ted and the CEO on our behalf?" "You must be joking. How can I forgive you? I'm reporting everything to the police. As I watched the paramedics carefully place Holly onto a stretcher, I offered a reassuring smile to my granddaughter. Lynn, you did wonderfully. You saved your mom. We'll go to the hospital now, and then we can rest at Grandma's house. Thank you, Grandma. At the hospital, both my daughter and granddaughter were diagnosed with malnutrition. Lynn was discharged the same day, but Holly, deeply traumatized, needed to be hospitalized for further treatment. Ted returned briefly to be with his wife and daughter, and his presence helped restore Lynn's smile and brought signs of recovery to Holly. I felt a profound sense of relief. As for the in-laws, they faced legal consequences after a thorough police investigation. The CEO had recorded their actions, which confirmed severe abuse. Since their home was rented, they were evicted, and a claim for $47,000 was filed, $30,000 for embezzlement, and $17,000 for damages. Thanks to my connections with the CEO and reliable childhood friends, the in-laws will be required to repay the amount by working at a specific factory after their prison term. For now, the three of us are enjoying a peaceful time together, eagerly awaiting Ted's return. Once he's back, we plan to move in together at my place. I'm looking forward to a brighter future, supporting my daughter and son-in-law, and cherishing the joyful moments with my granddaughter.
My mother-in-law told me something surprising. She said, "We're going to live together now. We turned the house into 2 separate homes to make it easier. Is the house in your name, Emma? Sorry to ask, but can you pay the $80,000 bill for the changes?" My mother-in-law and husband thought it was funny, but I felt determined. I was going to tell them something important, even though my husband didn't know yet. I had proof too. My name is Emma Davis, and I'm 26 years old. I live a little away from the city in a place surrounded by nature. I work in an office and draw pictures for fun. Recently, I've been sharing my drawings online and reading the comments people leave. My husband, who is 3 years older than me, and I have been happily married and living in our beloved old farmhouse since we got married. But there's been a visitor who comes by once a month since then, and they always give me a headache. Emma, I'm here. Please open up quickly." I hurried to the front door when I heard the insistent banging. "Ah, it's my mother-in-law. I'll open it right away," I said, even though there's a doorbell right next to the door. I tried to smile as I opened the sliding door. There are so many bugs around here. It's so annoying. Is George still at work? Poor thing, even on Saturday. Oh, I brought some of his favorite food. I saw a tired-looking woman holding a big bag, waiting at the door. As she chattered on, I tried to keep up my fake smile. This visitor, who comes once a month, is none other than my husband's mother, my mother-in-law. Since my husband is an only child, she feels it's her duty to look after him even after we got married. She even gives me tips on how to manage the house. Last time she visited, she rearranged the whole fridge, making it a hassle for me to prepare breakfast the next day. I remember my husband telling me before we got married, if my parents ever need care, we'll live together. I hope you understand. I'm disappointed at the thought of leaving our lovely old house when the time comes, but I've accepted it. What bothers me more is the idea of living with my mother-in-law all the time. I feel sorry for my husband, as it's not something I'm looking forward to. Fast forward 2 years into our married life in the farmhouse. My husband told me that his father slipped on the stairs at home and broke his leg. They'll need our help from now on. Let's live together, just like we talked about before we got married. Yes, I'm worried too. So I think it's a good idea. Can I still do my drawings? I was concerned about my father-in-law's health, so I agreed to move in with them without hesitation. But I was worried that taking care of my in-laws and doing housework might leave me with no time for my drawing hobby. Whether he knew about my worries or not, my husband just said, "I want you to focus on the house," and left for his office. Left alone in my room, I felt like I was giving up on my husband. As I looked through my drawings, I started sorting out my feelings. Just when I had decided to live with them, something unexpected happened. While I was at work, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet and got really dizzy. I collapsed. Thankfully, a colleague called an ambulance, and although I wasn't in danger, it turned out I had had a stroke at a young age after a medical checkup.
even though I had been warned about high blood pressure during health checkups before. I regretted not taking it seriously and going to the hospital. From the time I found out about the illness to being hospitalized, including tests, surgery, and recovery, it took about 2 months. It all happened so quickly, and I realized my husband showed very little concern for me. After being diagnosed with a stroke at a young age, I called my husband with trembling hands. But all I heard was disappointment in his voice, saying, "So living together will have to wait, huh?" I couldn't believe he was more worried about living arrangements than my health. Luckily, my father-in-law was still in the hospital with a fracture, so I didn't have to worry about taking care of him. This allowed me to focus on my treatment, which was a silver lining. Plus, since we didn't have kids, that wasn't an added concern. Suddenly, I thought of my mother-in-law, always talking about wanting to see her grandchild soon. But I pushed that thought away and grabbed my sketchbook. Lately, I had been too busy with preparations to live with my in-laws and undergoing tests since my stroke to indulge in my favorite pastime of drawing. I knew once I moved in with them, I'd have even less time for it. I decided to view my time in the hospital as a gift of freedom from God and resolved to enjoy my hobby to the fullest. Once this period was over, I promised myself to give my best to my husband and in-laws, whether it was doing chores or anything else. The 2-month hospital stay flew by, and finally it was time to leave. My husband casually asked if he should pick me up, but I wanted some time alone, so I declined, feeling a bit guilty. As I rode the bus, I looked out the window and saw the familiar scenery. I realized I was already near home. The sunlight shining on the lush green leaves was breathtaking, and I felt a mix of emotions, thinking goodbye to this beautiful natural setting. Since my in-laws' house is closer to the city, my life is going to change a lot from now on. Feeling a bit sad, I stepped off the bus at the familiar stop. As I walked towards what was supposed to be my beloved old home, I suddenly froze in astonishment. Instead of the familiar private house I knew so well, there stood a completely unfamiliar house that I had never seen before. After being in the hospital for about 2 months, I double-checked the surrounding buildings and the path I took, wondering if I had somehow gotten a location wrong. But it was no mistake. There was no point in wandering around, so I timidly pressed the intercom of the unfamiliar house. A voice I knew well, undoubtedly my husband's, responded with a simple yes. Still feeling confused, I quietly said, "It's Michelle," into the intercom. The front door creaked open and my husband, dressed casually, appeared. "Ah, welcome home. You're back earlier than I expected. I had the day off today. I could have picked you up," George said. "George, what happened to our house? Why has it changed so much?" I interrupted him, feeling disbelief, noticing his relaxed demeanor, perhaps indicating he had just woken up with his messy hair. Ignoring my anxiousness, George only responded vaguely, "Huh. What's going on? What happened?" without addressing my question. Just then, laughter echoed from inside the house. Unable to believe it, I pushed past my husband and made my way to the living room. Opening the unfamiliar door leading to the living room, I saw my mother-in-law lying on a couch, watching TV. She was laughing heartily, holding her stomach. "Why is my mother-in-law in this house?" I asked, bewildered. "Michelle, welcome back. Hospital stays can be long, but don't worry. I took care of the house while you were gone," my mother-in-law said casually. I was puzzled by what my mother-in-law meant by taking care of the house. Did she mean chores? With a sinking feeling, I pressed her on why our old house had changed so much. Without any hint of remorse, she replied, "Well, since we're all going to live together, I thought it would be more comfortable to remodel it into a duplex." The words "remodeled it into a duplex" kept echoing in my head. My mother-in-law had always been one to meddle in our lives, but I never imagined she would renovate our house without asking. And weren't we supposed to move into my in-laws' house, closer to the city center? Every time she visited our old house, she complained about the bugs and the walk from the station. So why all the changes now? "Oh, and if something else important I have to tell you," my mother-in-law said, switching off the TV with a grin. "The remodeling cost a bit. I believe the title to this house is under your name, Michelle. I'm sorry, but could you handle the payment?" My mother-in-law chuckled, devoid of any hint of apology. "Ah, it's $80,000, she said, her smile growing wider. "That's the cost of remodeling, and the title to this house comes with it, Michelle. $80,000. Her unexpected words hit me like a punch to the head, and my legs started shaking. I couldn't even find the words to respond. As I stared at my mother-in-law, stunned and laughing without a care, my husband appeared at the entrance and slipped into the living room. Seeing him, I instinctively moved towards him, holding on to a faint hope that he would support me. I repeated to my husband exactly what my mother-in-law had said, desperately awaiting his reaction, but all I got from him was a cold reply. "Well, that sounds about right. You'll handle it, won't you?" That's just who he is. When I had a stroke, he cared more about our living arrangements than my health. He's the kind of man who listens to his mother's every word, no matter how absurd. A man who always believes his mother is right. My discomfort and dissatisfaction towards my husband reached a boiling point. Once it overflowed, I was done. With all my heart, I decided I would leave this family behind. "I understand now, George. I'm going to divorce you and your mother, Cecilia. And no, Cecilia, you can handle the renovation costs on your home." I declared this all at once and turned my back on them, intending to leave the room quickly, but they weren't going to let me go so easily. "I've been losing interest in you anyway, so it's no big deal. But remember, this house is in your name, Emma, so you have a responsibility to pay," George remarked. "That's right, feel free to leave, but please settle your dues first," added Cecilia. I was astonished by their selfishness. I couldn't help but sigh. I was sure if I turned around, I'd see their smug faces grinning in victory, but I refused to look back. I stood tall and replied, "You keep saying the house is in my name, George, but did you forget that ownership has been transferred to you?" I revealed the truth, but they only laughed, thinking I was lying to avoid paying. That's when I brought up how George had asked me to change the property's ownership when we got married, as he didn't want the house to be in his wife's name for appearance's sake. Since I didn't particularly care about the property title, I had immediately transferred it to his name. Upon hearing this, their laughter abruptly stopped, and I could feel their panic gradually setting in. "I don't recall saying such a thing." "There's no proof anyway," George retorted. Anticipating this response, I turned back to face them, walked past them, and opened a drawer in a shelf from our old house. "Let's see, it should be somewhere around. Ah, here it is. This is the proof," I said, taking out a document that listed the property and house ownership and showed it to them. When I pointed to the part that showed the ownership was in George's name, his face went pale. "That's fraud. I never thought you'd actually do it, and I definitely can't pay such a huge sum of $80,000. George exclaimed. I was disgusted by my husband's reaction. He started yelling as soon as he realized the payment obligation was on him. "Since a decent conversation seems impossible, let's communicate through lawyers from now on. Cecilia, your son seems to be in quite a pickle, so please take good care of him from now on," I stated calmly beside my loud husband. I smiled at my mother-in-law, who stood dazed, and finally turned my back on them, leaving their home for good. After that, my husband called several times, but I chose to ignore him entirely, opting instead to communicate formally through a lawyer, given our strained relationship and the issues with my mother-in-law. The divorce was settled without any problems. Regarding my husband's accusation that changing the property's ownership was fraud, it was determined that it was a mutual decision made when we got married 2 years ago. My lawyer reassured me with a smile that this was neither fraud nor anything illegal. With that, all the uncertainty inside me disappeared completely. It turned out that I was supposed to foot the bill for renovating the house as soon as I got discharged from a hospital. I couldn't help but appreciate the well-executed, spiteful move of pushing me into a difficult situation just after I had undergone surgery and rehabilitation and finally got discharged due to illness. In the end, since the house was in my husband's name, it was his responsibility to pay the hefty renovation costs, and he ended up cornering himself. Moreover, I was able to secure alimony after the divorce was finalized. My husband, faced with a claim for an amount he couldn't possibly pay off, either borrowed money from risky sources or didn't pay at all. While I was in the midst of the legal battle with my husband and mother-in-law, I received an apology from my father-in-law, Bob, who had been hospitalized with a broken leg, saying, "I'm sorry for my wife and son's behavior." Of course, it didn't seem that Bob was directly involved in this matter, but it couldn't be denied that for 2 years after our marriage, he had turned a blind eye to his wife and my indifferent husband. After briefly replying to Bob's message, I made the decision to cut all ties with my old family and start afresh. Since then, my health has been gradually improving and I was able to return to work. When I was married, I used to draw illustrations, but I always felt restricted by my husband's presence. Now, I can immerse myself in drawing whenever and however I want. Initially, drawing was just a hobby, but now I receive job offers through the social networking site where I post my illustrations. I spend more time drawing for work than for pleasure these days. My current dream is to buy an old farmhouse in a somewhat rural town using the alimony from my husband and my savings, and to open an art studio there. Today, I'm taking the first step towards realizing that dream by heading to see an old farmhouse. As I gaze out at the scenery from the bus, I can't help but think back to the day I left the hospital, the day that changed my life forever. The natural scenery outside remains the same as it was that day, but my feelings are clearer now, and I'm filled with excitement for the new life that awaits me. The leaves on the trees, illuminated by the sunlight, look so bright and dazzling. My husband has been cheating on me. He's been showering his mistress with designer goods, and what's worse, he's been using my credit card to pay for these extravagant purchases. For the sake of our son, I've endured his behavior up until now, but I've reached my breaking point. I can no longer tolerate this. I have to take action, and the person who came to my rescue was the last one I expected. My name is Flora, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married to Adam for 10 years, and our beloved son Dominic turned 8 this year. I'm living my dream as a novelist, a career I've always aspired to pursue. My mystery series has a strong following, allowing me to secure several monthly serials, and my standalone books are also doing well, keeping me busy every day. At the start of our marriage, my husband had a job, but he stopped working as soon as I began earning. For the last 2 or 3 years, he's mostly lounged around the house, occasionally going out to play pachinko. However, today he changed into a suit, which was out of character for him. Something seemed off. Why the suit? I boldly asked him. Adam, it's unusual to see you in a suit. Where are you going? I questioned. My husband seemed startled but quickly composed himself. I'm going to a job interview, he responded. For what position? I asked. Well, it's for a job, obviously. I thought it was time for me to start working again, he replied. Good luck, I said, trying to sound supportive. He left the house, and I genuinely believed he was attending a job interview. I thought maybe he was reconsidering his priorities now that our son is still young and our future needed to be secured. However, he didn't return home until 1 a.m. I was up late working on a deadline, and when he finally stumbled in, he reeked of alcohol and perfume. He passed out on the living room sofa with his smartphone still in his hand. It was unlocked, and out of sheer curiosity, I decided to take a look. What I saw on his phone shocked me. To cut to the chase, my husband was cheating on me, and his affair was with my best friend, Delphine. They had gone to a fancy restaurant with a stunning night view that very day. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It was too much to bear. How could Adam cheat on me with Delphine? Didn't Delphine have her own husband? I trusted them both. The unexpected reality brought tears to my eyes. I knew I shouldn't wake my husband, so I held back my sobs. Evidence, I needed evidence. For now, I sent the proof of the affair to my own phone and decided to think about what to do next. The next morning, I casually asked my husband, who seemed to be behaving as usual, "Hey Adam, about yesterday." "Yesterday?" he responded, seemingly puzzled. You mentioned you had an interview, but you got home pretty late. I was just curious about what happened." My husband looked away, clearly trying to come up with an excuse. "Actually, I ran into a friend after the interview and we went out for drinks." "A friend? Who?" I pressed. "Just some guy, Flora. Do I need to explain everything?" He replied defensively. "You're right," I conceded, knowing he was hiding the fact that he had met with Delphine. His evasiveness only confirmed his infidelity. 1 month after discovering my husband's affair, I was still grappling with the situation. I hadn't confronted him about the cheating yet, knowing it would create a rift in our relationship. If I were on my own, I would have shown him the evidence of his affair and immediately sought a divorce. However, I couldn't bear to separate him from our son, Dominic, who was only 8 years old. Despite his frequent outings, taking advantage of my focus on work, this gave me the perfect opportunity to collect evidence of his infidelity. While he was out, I searched his room and found several unfamiliar receipts. It seemed he had been purchasing women's designer items, but there was no sign of them in his room, and he certainly hadn't given me any. There was only one conclusion. Adam had been showering Delphine with luxury goods, but where was he getting the money for that? He's unemployed and living off my allowance. I gave him a monthly allowance, but he likely doesn't have any savings left. Worried, I decided to follow him. During this time, I called my brother over to watch Dominic, without telling him about my husband's affair. I fibbed to my brother, saying, "Hey, sorry to bother you out of the blue. It's no problem, but what's up? Why do you suddenly need me to watch Dominic?" "I just want to go shopping alone," I lied. "Shopping? You've never been one to shop in person. Don't you usually shop online?" "Normally, yes, but today I want to buy something that's only available in store. Can you watch Dominic for me?" "All right, but don't be gone too long. Dominic gets lonely," he agreed. "Thank you," I said, relieved. With my brother's help, I was able to set my plan in motion. I watched my husband walking arm in arm with my best friend Delphine. I knew what was happening, but seeing it with my own eyes was a painful shock. They were cheerfully entering a high-end designer store. Then I witnessed something outrageous. Is that my credit card? My husband was using my secondary credit card to pay the bill. I always kept my main card safely in my wallet, while the secondary card was left unattended in a drawer. My husband took the secondary card without my knowledge and used it to fund gifts for his mistress. Over the past few months, I've been making large purchases for work, such as monitors, keyboards, and even new furniture, causing the balance on the credit card to skyrocket. Both cards were linked to the same bank account, and with my busy schedule, I hadn't reviewed the details closely. This negligence came back to haunt me. Not only was he cheating on me, but he was also using my money freely. Any lingering affection I had for my husband had completely evaporated. Although I was partly to blame for not noticing sooner, I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. I took clear photos of the two of them together and went home, simmering with anger. For the next few days, I focused on plotting my revenge. I repeatedly checked his usual computer when he wasn't around, knowing he sensed his phone and computer, allowing me easy access to his communications with Delphine. Soon, I discovered that the two of them were planning a trip to Okinawa during the upcoming long weekend, a 4-day, 3-night getaway. This was my chance. I planned to execute my revenge during my husband's affair trip, but one obstacle remained: my son. Carrying out my plan without my son discovering his father's infidelity would be challenging. I decided to turn to my brother for help once more. "Hey bro, sorry to bother you again, but could you watch Dominic for me during the upcoming long weekend?" "You mean for all 4 days?" he asked, sounding taken aback. "I have something important to take care of." His question made me uneasy. Before I could respond, he spoke firmly. "Flora, stop trying to handle everything alone. Adam's cheating on you, isn't he?" I was taken aback. "How did you know?" "I heard it from Dominic," he said. "Dominic?" I repeated in surprise. Even though my son was young, he had picked up on his father's infidelity. I don't know if he fully understood what was happening, but he sensed his father growing close to someone other than me, and it was causing me pain. Dominic, in his innocent way, had observed the situation. "I thought I was shielding Dominic from this," I murmured. "It seems Adam's actions have affected you so deeply that even Dominic could sense it. Are you still considering staying with someone like that?" "But if I divorce Adam, Dominic will be upset," I started to say. But then Dominic, who had been in the next room, suddenly appeared. "Mom, it's okay. I'm on your side." "Dominic, are you sure?" I asked, moved by his words. "I don't need someone who makes Mom sad." "As long as I have you, I'm okay," he said resolutely. "Thank you, Dominic, and thank you too, bro," I said, grateful for their support. With the help of my son and brother, I made up my mind to take action against my husband without any hesitation. We began moving to a new home on the day my husband was set to leave for his trip with his mistress. My brother helped us, and we discreetly packed our belongings whenever my husband was away. The night before the long weekend, I decided to confront my husband and give him one last chance. He was visibly excited about his trip the next day, and I went straight to the point. "Adam, what's with the suitcase? "Why are you packing?" He replied, "Oh, this? I'm going on a trip with a friend starting tomorrow." "A trip? Did you mention anything about that? It's a last-minute decision, isn't it? You're using the allowance I give you," I questioned. My husband seemed annoyed and tried to brush off my questions. "Don't talk to me about it anymore, Aura." I couldn't care less about his excuses. I lowered my voice as I asked, "Are you really going on this trip with a friend?" My husband flinched at my tone, his shoulders tensing, but he still attempted to lie. "Of course. You've been nagging me a lot." "I see. A trip with a friend. Have a good time," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I could be fun regardless of whether he told me to be. "Just don't overdo it," I said as I left my husband's room. To be honest, if he had come clean with me then, I was considering settling matters amicably, requesting alimony and child support, despite his infidelity. After all, there was a time when I loved him. When my novels weren't selling well, he supported me and kept me going. I didn't want to harbor hatred or resentment toward him. However, after everything he's done, I can't afford to remain calm. For the sake of my son and my future, I need to end my relationship with him. There's no point in holding back any longer for a man who continually lies. The following morning, my husband had already left for his trip. I opened the drawer and confirmed that he had taken my credit card as usual. I immediately contacted the credit card company, reported the card as lost, and requested an immediate block on its use. My son woke up and I greeted him, "Good morning." He responded with a beaming smile. "Mom, today's the day, right?" "Huh?" I asked. "We're moving to our new home today, right?" he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Seeing his enthusiasm erase any lingering anxiety. "That's right, Monique. I've canceled the credit card, and now it's time to move." "Yeah, I'm excited for our new home," he said. Thanks to my brother's help, the move went smoothly. My son and I settled into our new home, while my husband's belongings were sent to a designated location. The next day, we were all relaxing at the new house with my son and brother. I got a call from my husband. "Hello? Flora, is that you? Could you transfer me some money? I've spent more than I planned, and now I need some extra cash." He likely couldn't use the card since I had frozen it, so he was asking me for money without directly mentioning the card. His request disgusted me. "Didn't you say you were going to stick to your allowance?" I asked. "Come on, don't say that. I can't enjoy my trip alone if you do that," he whined. "Alone? Don't you mean with Delphin?" I shot back. My husband seemed taken aback. "What are you talking about? Who's Delphin? What's going on with the card?" "It's pointless to play dumb. You're all over the place. Your lies aren't working," I snapped. "It's clear you've been cheating on me with my best friend Delphine. Did you really think you wouldn't get caught?" "This is what it looks like. It's not cheating," he tried to justify himself. My anger flared at his attempts to make excuses, oblivious to the presence of my brother and son. I didn't hold back, letting my fury loose on him. I had been holding in my anger for too long. "Stop making excuses. You have a family, yet you chose to have an affair with another woman and misuse someone else's credit card. Do you realize how low you've sunk?" "Flora, let's calm down," my husband tried to say. "Calm down? How can I stay calm when I'm talking to the person I despise most in the world? Let me make this clear. I have no intention of forgiving you or offering any help. You and the woman you cheated with can go straight to hell. Don't you dare show your face in front of me or Dominic ever again." I hung up the phone abruptly, cutting him off. Shortly after, Delphine, the woman he cheated with, called me. "Flora, what are you doing?" she demanded. "Delphine, long time no see. How's your trip with your best friend's husband going?" I retorted. "Shut up. Explain yourself." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. You sent Adam's belongings to my house, didn't you?" "Yes, during our move, I had shipped my husband's things to Delphine's house, knowing she was the one he had the affair with. Since Delphine was married, her husband was naturally at home. I had done it on purpose, sending all of Adam's belongings to her husband along with a detailed letter explaining the situation. As I shouted at Delphine over the phone, nearly breaking the speaker, I expressed my anger. "Are you serious? My husband found out, and Isn't that expected? You're having an affair even though you're married. My supposed best friend did such a disgraceful thing. You're the worst. I'm incredibly disappointed in you." "Excuse me?" she responded, taken aback. "I think that's my line," I retorted. "You were the one having an affair with my husband. Do you think I forgive you for that? Who showed disrespect first?" "Flora, I wasn't serious. It was just a fling. There's no way I'd settle for a jobless loser like him. Whether you were serious or not doesn't matter to me. I'm divorcing him soon. Your affair is a fact, and I won't forgive you. I'll be demanding the maximum compensation from you, so be ready." "Compensation? What? I didn't agree to that. Why should I pay compensation? It's natural. You did something that warrants it." "Wait, I'm a housewife. I can't afford to pay compensation." "I don't care. That's for you to figure out. Maybe you can beg your husband for help, though that doesn't seem likely." "Wait a minute, Flora, please," she started to plead. But I cut her off. "Goodbye." I hung up on her and blocked her contact. I finalized my divorce through a lawyer and demanded compensation from both my ex-husband and Delphine. I claimed child support and the money he had spent on the credit card without my consent. Delphine, saddled with debt from the compensation payments, was served divorce papers by her husband and reportedly kicked out of their home. She tried relying on her family but was turned away. As a result, she's now working night shifts and struggling to make ends meet. My ex-husband attempted to lean on Delphine, but she blamed him for causing her divorce. Their relationship quickly disintegrated, and they went their separate ways. As for my ex-husband, he's now juggling several part-time jobs just to get by day to day. Having been unemployed for so long, finding a stable job won't be easy. If he ever falls behind on compensation or child support payments, I won't hesitate to take action to collect what's owed. Meanwhile, my son and I are thriving in our new home. He's growing up fast, and each day is full of new experiences. I aim to continue showering him with love and shield him from any sadness.